His Excellency Charles Hay, MVO, British High Commissioner to Malaysia, Mr. Abrar A. Anwar, the British High Malaysian Chamber of Commerce Chairman and the Managing Director of Chief Executive Officer, Standard Chartered Bank Malaysia, Ms. Jennifer Lopez, Executive Director of BMCC, distinguished speakers, honored guests, valued members of BMCC, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon and good morning to you wherever you are, and a warm welcome to the BMCC's Green Conference 2020. Sustainable Finance, a Blueprint for Green Recovery, organized in partnership with Standard Chartered Bank Malaysia and supported by the British High Commission Kuala Lumpur. My name is Mastura Adnan, I'm from Standard Chartered Malaysia, and I'll be your MC for today. First and foremost, a heartfelt thanks to everyone for joining us in today's conference. A little bit of housekeeping before we start the session. Please be forthcoming with your questions during the sessions and send them only through Slido. You should be able to see the QR code on the screen, scan it, and submit your questions there. Please do not submit your questions in the public chat function or the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and because if time does not permit, we shall not be able to capture those. Today, we will be conferring on the scope of sustainable finance, including insights on sustainability and the challenges and opportunities that come from managing risk effectively and driving mitigation efforts. Our esteemed guest speakers will no doubt leave us with thought-provoking ideas and insights on the future of green sustainable finance. Without further delay, I would like to invite Ms. Jennifer Lopez, the Executive Director of the British Malaysian Chamber of Commerce, to deliver her welcoming remarks.
His Excellency Charles Hay, the British High Commissioner to Malaysia, Mr. Abrar Anwar, the BMCC Chairman and the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Standard Chartered Malaysia, distinguished speakers, valued members of BMCC, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon to everyone in Malaysia and the region, and good morning to everyone in the UK. Hello from Malaysia to all our overseas audiences. I do hope everyone is keeping safe and managing well during these challenging times. Welcome to the BMCC Green Conference 2020 in partnership with Standard Chartered Malaysia, supported by the British High Commission Kuala Lumpur. Ladies and gentlemen, like every other organizations, we at the Chamber had to put on hold numerous plans that were intended for 2020. However, we have remained active and agile during these difficult times. In addition to going digital, we have taken efforts to listen to our members and stakeholders' needs to ensure we are able to deliver the right value proposition to you, our members and stakeholders. From our findings, the sustainability and climate change continues to remain as one of the top agendas of government and business leaders, including our members. Hence, this collaboration with our fellow Sterling member, Standard Chartered Malaysia, to organize our first virtual Green Conference on the theme, Sustainability, a Blueprint for Green Recovery. I'm proud to stand here and say that our BMCC Green Conference has attracted 340 participants from Malaysia, UK, as well as the Southeast Asia region, representing a diverse background of stakeholders, business leaders, professionals who advocate the climate change agenda, government agencies and academics. Based on these numbers, it clearly demonstrates the importance and the interest of climate change movement and the need to start escalating efforts in tackling climate change, especially during these challenging times. On that note, on behalf of the BMCC, I would like to convey our sincerest appreciation to our partners for their collaboration in organizing this important and timely conference. Firstly, to Standard Chartered Malaysia, our main partner for enabling this conference and your continuous support towards the BMCC. And to my colleagues at the Department for International Trade and the British High Commission, Kuala Lumpur, thank you. We also like to thank our partners who have assisted us to promote this conference, Climate Governance Malaysia, fellow British chambers in ASEAN that form the Britain in Southeast Asia network, and our partners in UK, the British Malaysian Society. And last but not least, to all our speakers and panelists, what a lineup we have this afternoon. I trust we have a well-balanced representation of subject matter experts from the UK and Malaysia. As leaders of their respective organizations, they are certainly well positioned to share experiences, knowledge, insights, success story, and more importantly, challenges and proposed solutions. In addition, we are proud to have the Honourable Finance Minister of Malaysia and the Lord Mayor of the City of London as part of our esteemed panel of speakers. Our appreciation to all our speakers. With that, thank you to all of you for joining us today. I wish you all a pleasant and fruitful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. You have certainly set the tone for an engaging afternoon. And now, it gives me great pleasure to invite Mr. Abrar Anwar, the Chairman of British Malaysian Chamber of Commerce and the Managing Director and CEO of Standard Chartered Malaysia, to deliver his remarks.
Thank you, Masura. A very good afternoon to our Malaysian audience, and good morning to all our participants tuning in from the UK. On behalf of the BMCC and Standard Chartered Malaysia, it brings me great delight to welcome you to this special and timely virtual conference that aims to ignite an important discussion surrounding green economy and sustainable finance. This is a matter that must be given serious considerations today, for which failure to do so will have grave implications upon our fabric of environment, society, and governance tomorrow. This is a worldwide movement, and the UK government is one of the global pioneers in championing all things green and sustainable. By extension, the British High Commission in Malaysia here has been doing a tremendous job over the years in instilling this awareness and pushing the agenda through its Green is Great campaign. On this note, it is an honor to have His Excellency Charles Hay, British High Commissioner to Malaysia, with us at this conference. Your Excellency, thank you for your support today and the support of the teams at the High Commission and the Department of International Trade. The values and urgency of your offices to strive towards a green recovery is shared with us at the BMCC and Standard Chartered. For this, I believe that our collaboration in making this virtual conference possible is not just an ideal partnership, but an imperative one. We are also honored to have the Finance Minister of Malaysia, Yang Berhormat Tengku Dato Sri Zafrul, and Alderman William Russell, the Lord Mayor of the City of London, with us for a special session later today. For those of us in Malaysia, we were pleased to hear the recent Budget 2021 announcement of government's commitment to advancing the green technology financial scheme and its alignments with UN's Sustainable Development Goals. This should pave the way for an intriguing dialogue on both our national economies and bilateral trade ambitions. I'm certain we can look forward to an eye-opening and thought-provoking session later, not just for Malaysian businesses, but for UK companies seeking to invest in future green initiatives. This conference would be incomplete, however, without the in-depth analysis and insights from our subject matter experts. Looking at our lineup of speakers and panelists, it is truly a privilege to have some of the best thought leaders in the industry joining us today. To all our speakers, thank you too for taking time off your busy schedules, and I join our audience in looking forward to your engaging sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, so much has been said about the COVID-19 pandemic that struck this year of 2020 that held so much promise for businesses globally. The unforeseen disruption to economies and financial systems is undeniable. However, if there is a main takeaway from this crisis is that it has turned our attention to the importance of business resilience and how sustainable finance can be an option towards recovery and sustainability. Even before the pandemic, the climate change agenda was already a priority agenda for many leading companies and governments. As preluded earlier, the UK remains at the forefront with early commitments to reduce carbon emissions by 100% by 2050, along with the recent announcement of the allocation of £134 million in incentives for green businesses. And now, after nearly a year, the realization to attain sustainability and embrace green finance as an economic recovery mechanism is ever clearer. Many governments, such as the UK, have included green measures in their crisis recovery packages by means of grants, loans, and tax reliefs, circular economy models, along with the research, development, and deployment of clean energy. Having said that, true sustainability has to be holistic. Green finance has to involve considerations and investments in ESG, or environment, social, and governance. Global policies before the COVID-19 outbreak was heavily centered on the environment and climate change. However, this fallout requires an immediate response to issues ranging from inequality, education, biodiversity, and government stability. In the aftermath of this pandemic, countless businesses have stalled and supply chains crippled, leaving millions jobless and global financial system in great peril. This crisis has now raised genuine questions about the resilience and security of our global financial system. There is a hope, however, analysts and economists are now seeing trends on how green finance has helped companies cope better during this crisis and why it is vital for global economic recovery. A roadmap or blueprint to focus on green finance and sustainable development goals has never been more crucial. Now is the time to start thinking and implementing, because sustainability will be the driving force, not just for our recovery now, but for the economic prosperity and financial resilience in the decades to come. Ladies and gentlemen, for all the reasons I have mentioned, this is the very purpose of our Green Conference today. The pandemic may have forced us indoors to conduct this virtually. However, the need to start thinking and acting green is now. At Standard Chartered, we have had a long commitment to sustainable finance. We have the financial expertise, governance frameworks, innovative thinking, technology, and geographical reach to get capital from where it exists to the market where it matters the most. We have been an early leader in sustainable finance, focused on emerging markets, from mobilizing more than $5 billion in blended finance for economic development to stopping financing of new coal-fired power plants anywhere in the world. Our approach brings together three themes. First, we believe in the critical importance of being a responsible institution through managing the potential negative impact that our activities could have through strong environmental, social, and governance risk filters. Second, we believe in the power finance can have a catalyzing positive impact on our communities and the environment. Our dedicated sustainable finance teams brings together our experience and expertise in managing environmental, social, and governance risk, as well as spotting opportunities and structuring solutions to drive positive impact financing. Finally, we are focused on where we believe catalyzing new sustainable finance matters most, regions where more capital is needed to drive sustainable growth and where their pathway to a low-carbon future will have a major contribution on the world's ability to meet the Paris Agreement's goal of keeping global warming well below 2 degrees. For over 20 years, our cross-sector framework has helped us apply international standards and best practices in Malaysia as well as across all of our markets. The services we provide contribute to the delivery of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, enable businesses to set up, trade, and expand, individuals to buy their own homes, save and protect their wealth for the future. We actively engage with the NGOs, regulators, investors, and technical specialists to ensure our framework remains fit for purpose, and we review it every 2 years to ensure that it reflects current industry best practice. In Malaysia, Standard Chartered SADC is one of 9 Islamic finance institutions, forming Bank Negara's community of practitioners tasked with promoting and embedding the value-based intermediation initiative. We are a member of the Joint Committee on Climate Change led by Bank Negara and Securities Commission Malaysia, which was set up in September 2019 as a platform for financial regulators and financial institutions in Malaysia to work together to deepen our understanding on climate risks and develop tools to effectively respond to those risks. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm extremely proud to share in a short amount of time we have been able to establish Standard Chartered as a strong brand name in sustainable finance. We have since received many acknowledgements, such as the World's Best Bank for Sustainable Finance 2019 by Global Finance. As the chairman of BMCC, I'm proud to see the Chamber continuing to remain relevant and agile through these difficult times. Since April 2020, we have gone digital and organized nearly 50 virtual events, webinars, roundtables, and forums. Many more virtual meetings with our members and government arms were conducted too, as we needed to adapt and cater to their changing needs and in turn provide the right value for our members. The BMCC is committed to playing an active role in encouraging our members of both Malaysian and British heritage to also make their commitments towards lowering carbon emissions. The Chamber will continue to collaborate with the British High Commission, Kuala Lumpur, by embarking on a series of programs leading up to the UN Climate Change Conference, or COP26. Do look out for further communications from the BMCC, as we will be welcoming collaborations with our members as well. With that, I conclude my appreciation once again to the British High Commission for this collaboration. To all our speakers and attendees, thank you once again, and I wish you an insightful afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Abrar, for the wonderful remarks. Moving on, it is my honor to invite His Excellency Charles Hay, MVO, the British High Commissioner to Malaysia, to deliver his keynote address.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to address this conference. And my congratulations to the BMCC and to Standard Chartered for putting on such an impressive event. It's exactly the right subject and exactly the right time to be discussing it. And securing the Finance Minister and the Lord Mayor of the City of London, amongst others, is testament to that. So I'd like to begin by talking about climate change, which is an urgent and potentially irreversible threat to our planet. The UK has a particular responsibility in this area because the 26th Conference of the Parties to the UN Framework Convention for Climate Change or COP26 for short, is going to be held in Glasgow in Scotland from the 1st to the 12th of November 2021. The UK will host the event in partnership with Italy. The event should have been happening around about now, but of course because of COVID it had to be delayed. Now on the one hand that was a negative thing because climate change is an urgent issue that needs to be tackled, but on the other hand it does give us a bit more time to prepare and plan for a really ambitious set of outcomes. We've got 5 priorities for COP26. Firstly, the transition to clean energy. To meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, this transition needs to happen 4 times faster than it is at present. Countries, businesses and communities have to embrace the economic and social benefits of cheaper renewable energy. And it's remarkable how renewable energy is fast becoming the cheapest source of power available, and how banks and investment funds are shifting rapidly away from investments in fossil fuels. I'll come back to that in a minute. The world also needs clean transport, which is the second priority. Third priority is that we need nature-based solutions which protect and restore habitats and ecosystems. That's particularly important in mega-diverse and heavily forested countries like Malaysia. Our fourth priority is that vulnerable countries need support in adapting and becoming more resilient to the worst effects of climate change, which are, of course, already happening. Finally, all countries will need access to technology and, of course, to finance. We want our entire financial systems to be greener, to unlock growth and help create sustainable jobs. I'll come back to this in a minute. I'm very proud that the UK government has been leading the charge to the so-called net zero target. We became the first nation in the G7 to legislate for a net zero target by 2050. Recent announcements by China, Japan and South Korea have been incredibly encouraging, and there's a real sense, I think, the tide is turning. But there's no time to lose. On the 12th of December, the UK will host a virtual Climate Ambition Summit. The aim is to call on world leaders to step forward with bold and ambitious new commitments to cut emissions, as well as for finance to help the world's poorest countries to adapt to climate disruption, because the whole world needs to act now. Of course, there's in a way a more immediate crisis around us, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. But I think if this pandemic has any kind of a silver lining, it is that it gives us an opportunity for all of us to build back better and build back our economies to be greener. And that brings me to finance, because finance, of course, is a key enabler of change. A robust green finance ecosystem can catalyse public and private financial flows into green investment and clean sectors, which is absolutely essential for the transition to work. Now, to this end, with apologies for a bit of self-promotion on behalf of the UK, but that is, after all, what I'm here for as the UK High Commissioner, the British government has embarked on 5 major initiatives to enhance the UK's green finance industry. And I'm just going to go through these quite quickly. Firstly, we created the Green Finance Task Force to understand the barriers to green finance and make recommendations on how to overcome them. We established the Green Investment Bank, GIB, which has now been renamed the Green Investment Group, to support investment into green projects. This has reduced barriers to investment across the green economy, mobilising private sector capital that otherwise may not have been invested. Thirdly, we developed the UK Green Finance Strategy, which outlines how green finance will support the UK's economic policy and achieve our domestic and international commitments on climate change, the environment and on sustainable development. We set up the Green Finance Initiative, the GFI, led by the City of London Corporation to deliver on the UK Green Finance Strategy and to foster greater cooperation between the public and private sector. And I suspect you might hear more about that later from the Lord Mayor of the City of London. And just last week, we announced that we'll be issuing our first sovereign green bonds in 2021 as part of our COVID-19 stimulus planning. And I must note that this comes just a few days after Malaysia's announcement on issuing a sustainability bond. And I must congratulate the Finance Minister for his ambition. And again, I'm sure you'll hear more about that from him a little bit later on. If I may, I'd also like to refer to some of the UK programmes we have running here in Malaysia for us to work together to achieve these outcomes. We know that we need a massive scale of change to overcome the threat of climate change. And to do this, partnership and knowledge exchange is crucial. Through the UK Prosperity Fund ASEAN Low Carbon Energy Programme, the UK government has been actively supporting the growth of green finance and energy efficiency industries in Malaysia and across the ASEAN region. Over the last year, the UK Prosperity Fund has supported the development of the green finance ecosystem here in Malaysia. We've delivered numerous workshops for regulators and financial institutions on climate stress testing and the impact of climate risks on the financial system. We've also supported the establishment of the Malaysian Sustainable Finance Initiative. Over the coming year, we're going to be working closely with the Malaysian Green Tech Corporation to support the development of energy efficiency finance. Our support through the Prosperity Fund extends to the corporate sector. So if you're a Malaysian company looking to raise a green bond or incorporate sustainability reporting, please do reach out to us and we can explore ways that we might be able to work together. The UK is committed to supporting Malaysia in its transition to a sustainable economy, and we welcome Malaysia's ambition to become the region's sustainable finance hub. Last month, I also announced a £2.5 million, that's 13 million ringgit, grant under the UK Partnering for Accelerated Climate Transitions programme in Malaysia, which we call the PACT programme. And this PACT programme is part of the UK government's international climate finance commitments, much broader finance commitments to support partner countries like Malaysia in mitigating climate change. And I'm delighted to say that when the deadline of 9th of November had passed, we'd received a large number of very high quality proposals across our priority areas, which are green finance, energy and climate action enabling environment. Now, I know we've got a big audience tuned in today, mainly from the corporate sector. I know that you, the business community, collectively understand that building a green economy isn't just good for the environment, it's also good for the bottom line. The economics are becoming more and more compelling. As I mentioned earlier, the cost of renewable energy is falling fast. The International Energy Agency has said that solar power is now the cheapest form of power available globally. The world is moving decisively and quickly away from coal, and oil and gas will, I'm sure, be next. A clean, resilient recovery is an opportunity for your companies to develop new long-term business and enable the clean transition, which will be of benefit to both people and the planet. The Race to Zero campaign is the largest ever alliance of businesses and non-state actors committed to the target of net zero by 2050 at the latest. And the world needs your businesses to make this commitment and to be part of the story and not to be left behind and out of it. Turning to trade and investment, UK trade and investment, I think British companies are very well placed to contribute to the decarbonisation of key sectors of the Malaysian economy. Standard Chartered Bank itself is a fine example, as we've already heard from Abrar. And the UK's expertise comprises world-leading private finance institutions, insurance firms, law firms, accountancy firms, exchange, index and data providers, asset managers and environment and energy consultancy firms. In fact, the whole ecosystem that's necessary for green finance. I believe that British NGOs and think tanks provide best-in-class thought leadership in this area too. And our professional bodies and universities, which will be very familiar to all of you, provide education, training and qualifications globally. And many of them are already present in Malaysia, including 5 UK university campuses. I'm looking forward to hearing perspectives from 2 of the UK's biggest investments in Malaysia, in Shell and Smith & Nephew, in the panel session coming up next. Some of you might be interested in high-value green investment opportunities in the UK. And our newly created Office for Investment, just announced by the Prime Minister Boris Johnson last week, will work across government to facilitate Malaysian and other foreign investment in exciting sectors like offshore wind and electric vehicles. In conclusion, climate change and the COVID pandemic are grave threats to a sustainable and prosperous future. We need to tackle these twin challenges, and doing so presents a unique opportunity to promote prosperity, inclusivity, and a sustainable future for us all. To build back better and greener, we must work in partnership. Governments, regulators, businesses, financial institutions, civil society. We're really excited to be working with Malaysia to enhance the green finance landscape, and I very much hope this event will help us to share and to learn together. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you have a very productive afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your great address. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin our first panel session, a gentle reminder, especially for those who have just joined us, that you can only submit questions through Slido by scanning the QR code. Questions submitted through the public chat or Q&A functions at the bottom of your screens may not be captured. This afternoon, our first industry digital panel will be sharing their in-depth knowledge on green investments for environment and business benefits. I would now like to hand over to my colleague, Mr. Bilal Fabey, the Director of Islamic Business and Head of Product Management, Standard Chartered SADC Malaysia, to moderate our first session. Over to you, Bilal.
Thank you, Ms. Sura, for the introduction, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bilal Pervez, and I am the Director of Islamic Business and Product Management for Standard Chartered SADC Malaysia. I am honored to be moderating this panel today with the theme Green Investments and Environment for Business Benefits. Before we begin, I would like to introduce the esteemed panelists who have joined us today. Yang Mulia Tengku Dato, Abdul Aziz Tengku Mahmud, who is the Chief Executive Officer of PNB Merdeka Ventures SG in Berhad. Tengku Mahmud is currently the CEO of PNB Merdeka, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of PNB. He is responsible for development of Merdeka 118 project, comprising of 118-story tower, hotel, retail mall, and residential towers. We also have on the panel Karen Wesley, Vice President Environment, Shell Global. Karen joined the Shell Foundation in 2001 as part of the startup team designing and implementing the foundation strategy and managing energy and poverty programs. Her last role was as Global Carbon Solutions Manager for Shell and Global Opportunity Manager for Carbon Capture and Storage. And lastly, we have Mark Arthur, Site Leader, Smith & Nephew, Malaysia. Mark is the site leader for Smith & Nephew Greenfield Manufacturing Site, which is currently under construction in Penang, Malaysia. The new facility will be a LEED Silver certified and under Mark's leadership aims to achieve zero waste to landfill ratio and will operate on 100% renewable energy. So ladies and gentlemen, sustainability is all about ensuring that the commitment to meet the UN SDGs by 2030 does not remain an empty pledge. Meeting these goals will require continual efforts and the involvement of all parties and stakeholders. Sustainable finance has a key role to play in mobilizing the necessary capital to deliver on the objectives on climate and sustainability. Interestingly, ESG investment issues now represent 1 in every $4 in the United States and has risen to nearly $24 trillion globally. A majority of studies looking at the relation between companies' ESG practices and their financial performance found a direct link with companies that do not do good to the environment socially and for the communities do well financially as well. This was backed by the evidence that shows that companies with good environment and social performance outperforms their counterparts by 210 basis points for return on equity and 120 basis points for return on assets. In addition, International Finance Corporation estimates $23 million of investments required from 2016 to 2030, out of which ASEAN requirement is $3 trillion. This is on back of increasing population consumption and high cost for climate change. This depicts the opportunity presented in the sustainability ecosystem. Now let's hear more from our panelists on this. So my first question is to Mark. So Mark, from a private sector perspective, how do you see the sustainable landscape in Malaysia, and who do you think has the responsibility to drive this agenda? Over to you, Mark.
Great. Thanks, Bilal. And before I answer everyone, I just want to thank the British Malaysian Chamber of Commerce and the Standard Chartered Malaysia for inviting me to speak today. In answer to your question, I think that there's a joint responsibility between the private and public sectors. And that key responsibility is that interplay between the two entities that really drive the most meaningful and most effective relationship. And what I mean by that is from a public sector, I think that there needs to be the right level of incentivization. There needs to be the right level of creating awareness for a marketplace, and the right level of regulations that ensure and really empower and promote that ability to deliver and develop green energy and develop a green incentive base. On the private sector, one that I'm representing, it's very important to, indeed stay committed to overall green initiatives and drive this and continue to promote this as we have in Smith & Nephew. So as a quick background for you, Smith & Nephew has long been a proponent of green initiatives, and we've been publishing a sustainability report for the last 19 years. And in our industry, that's one of the first. And from that perspective, and from the private perspective, it's really critical to A, drive that awareness, and B, drive that value for the end customer. And the end customer value for this is really in a greener, cleaner planet. And so from a private sector perspective, we've done a lot of things at Smith & Nephew to really promote this. And it's actually even come at a bit of a cost on the balance sheet, but in the end, from a corporate social responsibility, it's actually come to us as an incredible benefit in the end. A couple of examples I'd like to share with you on this realm have to do with our investment in renewable energy in our Memphis, Tennessee manufacturing facility. So we're building a manufacturing facility here in Malaysia, in Penang. It's an orthopedics manufacturing facility. And in this manufacturing facility that we're building here, our target, as Bilal mentioned, is to be 100% renewable energy. Well, we've achieved that in our largest manufacturing site, which is based in Memphis, Tennessee. And at that site, we actually have converted to wind energy, and that has not only come to us as a benefit because of the benefits it provides the environment, but it actually, in the end, has cost us a slight amount of money. But I think that's what's really critical, is that merger of the two, the private and the public sectors merging together that drive the market, and potentially it might be a premium. And for us, it was about $110,000 of annual spend in 2019 for us to achieve that. But in the end, what it's doing is driving more awareness. It's driving the demand for renewable energy and green energy. And I think in the end, with that proper set of incentives, the proper set of regulations, and that willingness to invest, such as Smith & Nephew has, will end up getting us across the finish line in a very accelerated fashion.
Thanks, Mark. So I think what you mentioned is quite right in terms of the public and the private partnership. And the government in all the markets which are accelerating in this field have a great responsibility. And Malaysia has done a lot, as we just heard from from Abrar and His Excellency Charles. And I'm sure you will hear more about this when we have our next session, when His Excellency Minister of Finance will also be joining. So I'll move towards Karen, who's representing Shell Global in this panel. So Karen, being a leading petroleum company, Shell has publicly announced aspiration around its sustainability practices with a net zero energy emission target by 2050. Can you please share some of the steps which have driven Shell on this agenda, whether it is CSR, regulation, or consumer preference? Sorry, Karen, I think we cannot hear you. Okay. I think we'll move to Tengku Mahmud while Karen can fix her mic. So thank you, and welcome to the session. Thank you for joining us. And from PNB Merdeka's perspective, we would like the audience to know more about some of the initiatives that you have taken in towards a zero carbon economy.
Thank you, Mr. Bilal, and also good afternoon to everyone. His Excellency Charles Hay, British High Commissioner to Malaysia, and Mr. Abrar, Anwar, MD of Standard Chartered, and fellow panelists and everyone in this green seminar, this webinar this afternoon. What I'd like to do as an introduction, perhaps I can relate to what Merdeka Ventures, PNB Merdeka Ventures is doing at the moment. We are at the moment constructing or rather the owner and builder of the 118-story building in the city of Kuala Lumpur, near the Merdeka Stadium, if you all know KL. And this site is about 16 acres. We have one tower, which is about 118 stories, and flanked by three residential towers of about 60 stories. And at the same time, we have a retail mall and also West Podium Block. On in all, it is sitting on a 16-acre site. So in coming up with the planning and design of this tower, which currently we have reached the top actually. So we are practically the tallest building in Malaysia now. I think we have started earlier on to say that it has got to be a green building. So in order to fulfill that ambition, we set a criteria to meet the standards set by the green accreditation bodies such as LEED, US-based LEED, and also GBI, which is a local-based green certification body, and also Green RE. So we have kind of looked at the three certifications that will be fulfilling to meet. And in coming up with this design, certainly our consultants who are on board on this project, we have to really look at what are the criteria, the sustainable criteria that we have to meet. And first and foremost, whether the site will be a sustainable site planning and management. And we are quite fortunate that the site is currently being served by three modes of transport, public transport, which is the MRT, Mass Rapid Transit, the RT, and also the monorail. So which means to say that by the time the building is completed in the next 2 years, by 2022, we would be able to encourage a lot more people to visit the tower by using public transport. That is very important because by doing so, we will reduce traffic congestion and so on. And also in the water aspects, water efficiency for the tower, we have adopted where we kind of collect and treat all the grey water within the tower, and 100% treatment and collection and treatment. At the same time, the rainwater harvesting, which is the first in the country that we are going for 100% water harvesting. This is something that we talk to the authorities. We say, let's do 100% water harvesting, and we use this water for irrigation of the landscaping works. And we would also have a thermal storage system for the district cooling. And this is also important because we will be able to reduce costs because we are generating the electricity at night and then supplying in the morning and the afternoon. At the same time, the leaves that we are using in the tower has got the regenerative drives, which means to say that whatever electricity that is being produced will be fed into the tower system. So among others, I think these are some of the basic things that we have looked at and see how can we be able to minimize the effect of all these emissions and so on, the carbon emissions and so on to the whole site actually, because we made a point that all the development within the site is green certified. Yeah, so I think we are serious in making sure that we fulfill this requirement. I think we are in the process, and I'm happy to say that at the moment the the green certification that we have now is already in the platinum grade, which is the highest certified certification that we can get. And of course, upon completion in 2022, all this will be checked again to make sure that we meet the design criteria. So I think that sustainable is part is certainly we hope to be able to follow through upon completion, because all this will be, for example, the GBI rating will be assessed every 3 years. So we actually have got to make sure that all our systems are in order to be recertified again and again.
Thank you, and it's really exciting to know that the tallest tower in Malaysia, which would be ready by next 2 years' time, would be self-sustaining, and it also shows the commitment that the country has towards sustainability at large. So let's try to check with Karen if she's back online with us. So Karen, my question just for the audience was around Shell. So Shell has a commitment to have it by 2050 on a net zero carbon basis. So we thought the audience would like to know that what are the driving factors, whether it is CSR, its regulation, or the consumer preference, which made Shell to embark on such an initiative.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, very much.
All right, sorry about that. Yes, thank you for an excellent question. And I will speak a little bit about the why we have the net zero emissions ambition, the what it is, and then how we propose to achieve it. And just on the why, you mentioned in your introduction that I joined the Shell Foundation. I joined Shell 20 years ago from the humanitarian sector, where I worked on poverty alleviation and emergency response, and joined the Shell Foundation to set up programs to reduce energy poverty. And what I learned through that, and as well in my previous career, is that energy really powers lives. If it's around having lighting so children can do their homework at night, or if it's mobility so someone can get to a job that supports their family, energy really is the engine, if you like, the motor behind growth and the economy in pretty much every part of the world. And at the same time, we face this horrible dilemma, which is that the way we've consumed energy to date just cannot continue. The amount of carbon in the atmosphere is reaching the point where not only do we have to stop putting carbon in, we actually have to start taking carbon out. So Shell is faced with this dilemma where the energy demand continues to grow. It powers growth, it powers economies, lifestyles, but at the same time, that same energy has to be provided with a much lower carbon footprint, which means that one of the first times in my career in Shell over the last few years, this sustainability agenda has been part and parcel, front and center of our entire global strategy, which includes 3 parts: being a world-class investment case, and we've heard from previous speakers about the ESG standards and the drive to really green the economy, and that finance is changing. We're also, the second part of our strategy is to thrive through the energy transition. As I mentioned, the energy system is going to transform towards a lower carbon energy set of solutions, and Shell needs to be a part of that to survive as a company. And then the third part is around our sustainability agenda, our societal license to operate. So that really summarizes the why. Why is Shell doing this? Then I want to talk a bit about the how and the what. So the what is the announcement, as was mentioned by the moderator, of the net zero energy company by 2050. So the ambition to be that company by 2050. Now that's a long way out, and there's quite a few incremental targets to hit before that point. But essentially what I wanted to discuss is what we're measuring, and then what we're doing to reach that ambition. And what we're measuring is actually very important, because it speaks to why collaboration and partnership between all the parties that have been mentioned so far today is so important. So what we're measuring is Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions. Scope 1 emissions being those that we emit from our own production, generation of our own products. The second, Scope 2, is the energy that comes from the power that we purchase to power our plants, our operations, our refineries. Scope 3 is the emissions that come from the customers who use our product, our energy product, either in mobility, so as petrol in a car, or in power. And that Scope 3 is actually 85% of the emissions for the whole value chain, which is why partnering with customers is such a key part of driving this change. What that means is that the unit that we use to measure this is an intensity unit, which is grams of CO2 per megajoule, that reinforces the need to focus on the use of the energy, not just the production of it. As I said, the 85%. The third piece here is that the target itself needs to move along with society. So as customers change their own behaviors and their own practices around, for example, transitioning from combustion engines to electric vehicles, or moving from coal-based power to gas to finally renewable power, Shell needs to be moving through that, transforming the energy system at the same time, which makes collaboration fundamental. So how we are working on this are in three ways. One of the first ways is to reduce the emissions from our own operations. That's through energy efficiency, that's through substituting our own power with renewable power. So for example, we have renewable power on one of our platforms in Sarawak. We have renewable power in more and more of our stations here in Malaysia. And substituting our power consumption for renewables is one step. Another one is collaborating across our sectoral value chains. That means working with the shipping industry, with the aviation industry, with mobility, with heavy industry, to provide products, power products to them that reduce their own carbon emissions. Which leads me to the third very key point, which is that carbon is a stock problem. There is simply too much carbon in the atmosphere now to support our lifestyles as they are, which means that Shell is also investing heavily in sinks, which means technologies or forests, you see a tree here behind me, that reduce carbon, take it out of the atmosphere. And this is going to be a very key element of reaching our ambition, because we can't support demand without also taking carbon out through sinks, forestry, and through carbon capture and storage, as I mentioned before. So that's the why we do it. It's fundamental to our strategy. What the ambition is all about, it's about all the emissions from our value chain, including the emissions from our customers. And then how we're doing it is asset reductions, zero emissions from our assets over time, collaboration across sectors, and investing in carbon sinks so that we actually reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere as a whole. I'll leave it with that, and thank you very much for your attention.
No, thanks, Karen. And I think it's very interesting that how well you have explained that at each step of the value chain, Shell has ambitions around sustainability and what steps are being taken. I'm sure this has been this is very useful for the audience that we have today. So let's continue on with our discussion. I'll move to Mark. So Mark, Smith & Nephew being a health tech focused company, and I'm sure we are undergoing a pandemic. These are challenging times, and everyone is trying to adapt and be agile to meet the requirements. So how, in terms of supply chains, how has Smith & Nephew adapted, and what are the steps Smith & Nephew has taken in greening the supply chains, especially during the current times, being a health tech company?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Bilal. So I think it's very clear our strategy that we've implemented. Just as I mentioned previously, we have been publishing our sustainability report for the last 19 years, but we've really energized our efforts into, and even in these times, these challenging times, and during COVID times, we've recognized that a green initiative is one that has a longer-term return on investment. And so we've really stayed focused on this, and we've created a sustainability council. And in that council, we've driven a lot more sense of purpose and measurables and accountability all the way up to the board of directors and, of course, externally to our shareholders. And that being said, our focus has been really around three key areas: people, planet, and product. And that's part of our sustainability approach. And as it relates to today's discussion, we're really going to be focusing on our planet. Now, from our manufacturing, so we're a British multinational corporation. We manufacture products that change and heal, change lives forever and allow people to live life unlimited. And with that being said, one of our core areas of focus recently, and not recently, but one of our core areas of focus and where we have the biggest impact to the environment is in our manufacturing facilities. So where we really focus there in our supply chain is where we can make, of course, the biggest impact. And some of our key measures that we've been able to put in place in this, in measuring and making sure that we actually are driving improvements in these key focus areas as it relates to the planet and as it relates to our manufacturing facilities, is on water use. We're monitoring and controlling and ensuring that we're using a reasonable amount of water. We need water to make our products. There's no way around it, but we want to make sure that we're conscious in the use and repurposing of water where necessary. We're really focusing on waste reduction in our manufacturing facilities. We've actually recycled at this point 76% of our total waste. Our goal is to achieve 80% by 2020, and by the end of this year, by the end of 2020. And then, of course, focusing on CO2 emission reduction. So if you look at it from a CO2 metric ton or CO2e perspective, we've reduced by about 16% since 2016. So pretty significant improvement. And that's just on the manufacturing side, right? As it relates to upstream and downstream, what we're doing is we're partnering with key suppliers and also making sure that there are efficiencies in our logistics network post-manufacturing, since our center point is on manufacturing. And that's, again, what we're building here in Penang. Those are the key areas of focus. I want to kind of highlight some of the high-level targets we've been able to put out there for everybody and published. And one of them is to achieve 80% absolute reduction in total life cycle greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. We want to be 100% renewable energy dependent and across two of our major manufacturing facilities. One is in Malaysia and one in Memphis, Tennessee, as I already spoke about, and that's by 2022. And I will say for that, and one thing I do want to bring up as part of this conversation today is it's going to be quite difficult for us to achieve that without a deeper level of partnership between, like I said, the private-public sector, and something I'm very passionate about. But as it relates to creating the right level of incentives, creating the right level of support, and the right level of regulations to ensure that there is a proper marketplace for us to even be able to invest in renewable energy as it stands today. We want to achieve 100% renewable energy in all of our manufacturing sites by 2025, and we want to achieve zero waste to landfill in Memphis as well as Malaysia by 2025, as I mentioned. So those are the kind of the outside-facing goals that we've set for ourselves, and the ones that we've targeted for one of our most significant manufacturing facilities, which is our new facility we're building here in Malaysia, as I said, and then one in Memphis. So those are really the kind of the key focus points as it relates to our manufacturing facilities. And beyond that, if you look at some of our vision statements and our mission as it relates to the environment and our planet initiatives, is to really prioritize that our materials that we're using are reusable, can be recycled, or can be or come from remanufactured sources. We want to make sure that we source our products from an environmentally sourced raw materials, and we want to make sure that our natural resource utilization is as efficient and effective as possible, as I said, with water use and those types of examples. And we want to make sure our manufacturing processes, not only do we focus on the the external facing as it relates to the environment, we want to make sure that the environment for our people is safe and secure, and that we're not, our manufacturing processes don't introduce hazards, to our people or the environment, as we said. A couple of other highlights that I'd like to call out, and some of the other achievements that we've been able to achieve recently. One of our other manufacturing sites, larger manufacturing sites, which is in Costa Rica, is currently achieving 1% waste to landfill, which is a really exciting and incredible target that we've been able to achieve through the efforts that the team has put forth there. So overall, all in all, again, it starts with manufacturing. We've worked upstream with our suppliers and helped work with them and partner with them to drive the right level of incentives from a private sector perspective. We've driven downstream optimization efforts to drive logistics improvements and enhancements there, and packaging improvements on that front. So it all has to do with focusing on where the biggest opportunity is, and that's the progress we've made thus far. And I'm excited to be standing in front of you today and talking about how we're going to be doing setting these aggressive goals and targets for our new manufacturing facility here in Malaysia on day one.
Thanks, Mark, and certainly very exciting, and best of luck with the project, and we look forward to having the Penang manufacturing facility ready, and I'm sure this is going to be, I mean, you will be able to achieve the landmarks that you have set through as your goals and objectives. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we discussed earlier, access to capital is of paramount importance vis-a-vis the sustainability journey and the meeting of the SDG objectives. So my next question links to the same, and that's to Tengku Mahmud, that with the conversion towards sustainable finance, how has it impacted the access to capital and the access to finance for PMB Merdeka?
Thank you, Mr. Bilang. I think, as I mentioned earlier, we talked about building a sustainable green building. At the same time, what we plan was how to match this with sustainable financing. So since we have already embarked on a program to have the type as green building with accreditations from LEED, Greenery, and also GBI, so we are in a very good position, this was about 3 years ago, to look at what can we do about financing this building. And at that point in time, the Merdeka Green Sri Sukuk, it's quite a long name, was first launched in about 2017. So we were one of the first early adopters and issuers of this Green Sri Sukuk. And we are very fortunate or pleasantly surprised that it's also applicable to green buildings, because normally when we talk about green sukuk or green bonds, you normally talk about renewable energy programs and similar. So when we were introduced to this concept that it is also applicable to green buildings, so we actually submitted a proposal to have our project certified or have a second opinion, because you need to go through a process before you have you were able to green sukuk or green bonds, which means that a second party need to review the project and give you an opinion whether or not you are eligible. And in our case, we have a second party which is based in Oslo, Norway, and the project was certified as medium green, because they go by the shades of green. So we have got this medium green certification. So with that certification, that means we are able to go to the market and issue a green sukuk. I think this is one of the main requirements to issue a green sukuk. And when we actually issued the green sukuk, we actually had the value or amount is about 2 billion ringgit. And we have an subscription of 1.5 times. I think it shows that the market is ready. And of course, because it's rather small compared to global numbers, I think it is fully subscribed by the local finance institutions. We don't even have a chance to go out to do a roadshow outside of Malaysia. It's fully subscribed when issued the green sukuk. So I think going forward, I think certainly there's a lot more room for the future asset owners to look for this sort of financing. And I think there is certainly a strong interest for green bonds or green sukuk. And I think certainly it would be also useful, I mean, if we also be able to attract global investors as well, because I'm sure there is also a strong interest to invest in similar projects in Malaysia. And I think the key issue is that we have to have commitment, because subscribing or issuing a green sukuk or bonds means that we have got sure that we produce an annual report to investors, which we have done for the last 3 years. And at the same time, we have to make sure that we monitor how we use the proceeds, and it has got to be tracked throughout the year, so that we are able to deliver that we are actually following the green principles. At the same time, we have also to report what are the green initiatives that we've been doing for the last 1 year when we write to the investors. So I think for us as asset owners, I think it's very useful because it keeps you making sure that the asset is being kept, what you call it, in the best possible condition. And also it gives a kind of everyone the commitment to make sure that we're able to meet the expectations of the investors, because I think this is a long haul. Our sukuk is tenure is 50. So imagine you have to write letters for the next 12 years to go. So it's a long process, yeah. But it's great, yeah.
Thank you. And that's exactly resonates with the reports that we keep seeing and the data that keeps appearing in the newspapers, that sustainable investments are now a preference by both institutional and private sector investors. Actually, there was one of the recent studies indicate that more than 90% of retail investors now prefer a sustainable or a ESG-linked investment. So that's how the market is evolving in terms of the sustainability milestones. So the role of corporate governance and the shareholders is very important when it comes to adapting ESG practices and to drive a culture throughout the organization. So this would be my next question to Karen, that given that Shell has made these ambitious initiatives and objectives, so how would the corporate culture in a company play a role in the adoption of the right mindset, and how would you advise other companies who are looking to set goals around climate change? Karen.
Thank you very much, moderator. And I'm hoping you can hear me still.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for that excellent question. As a leader in the company in sustainability, the culture change is sometimes the most exciting place to work. And in Shell, I'll just talk about the top-down culture definition, the bottom-up things that are happening, and bring it home to Malaysia. Because although I have a global role, of course, I'm here in Malaysia and seeing the activities here. So from a top-down perspective, I described the ambition that Shell set out starting in 2017. We were the first IOC, International Oil Company, to make such an ambition, covering the scope 1, 2, and 3, as I explained. We also, in the same time frame, established the remuneration policies for our executive to be based on their action on the net carbon footprint, which is the unit I told you about. And that includes portfolio change. I alluded a little bit to the fact that Shell is more and more involved in power. So power will play an increasing role in decarbonizing the overall energy system, as well as new fuels becoming increasingly important. So that's things like low carbon biofuels, hydrogen, and so forth. So really driving investment into a new energy system, as well as then investing in the other R&D, the research and the transition. So things like carbon capture and storage, things like green hydrogen, for example. These are all things that are part of the way of tracking activity and performance across the company. At the same time, from a more bottom-up perspective, 10% of the Shell staff, any Shell staff member's bonus is based on the greenhouse gas performance of the company. So that's a company-wide incentive. And that really drives a lot of activity across Shell. And what I like about that is it takes me to another kind of key point about carbon. Carbon is a fungible molecule. That means that anywhere you take it out of the atmosphere is a good thing. As I talked about the stock problem that we have. So what that actually translates to is that no act is too small. No act of carbon reduction is too small, and everybody in the company and everybody in society can do something. And that empowerment, I think, has really unleashed a great deal of creativity and innovation across the company. And what it really means is that, setting a lower carbon ambition is about daily habits. It's about taking daily actions in every decision that's made throughout the company, be it at the very top level around portfolio and capital allocation, down to how we choose to provide power, as I said, to some of our large plants, down to how offices are managed in terms of energy efficiency and the green building agenda that you've also described. So both Menara Shell in Kuala Lumpur and the Cyberjaya Shared Service Center are also certified green buildings. And that's where I want to go. visited the Cyberjaya Center a few months ago, and I was so inspired by the team there. They have also taken on a net zero ambition for emissions and have done masses of work on energy efficiency, installing solar power on their roof. They've also taken a net zero waste ambition. They're composting all their food waste, and they have no food waste now going to landfill. They also just have a very inspiring campaign across the whole staff base on greening, getting to green, and they track that every day very visibly. They also are rewarded for that in their performance. So what I mean to say here is that the most top-down ambition and the most bottom-up behavior can really have the impact that we need, which is urgent, because as I said, carbon is a fungible molecule and everything matters, which really brings me back home to Malaysia again to say that one of the biggest aspects of driving this change is going to be partnership, collaboration, and also working across industry. And I did want to mention that Petronas themselves made their net zero emissions ambition announcement in the last few weeks, which is really a great and significant step for Malaysia. And then to conclude with that we are really not competing around carbon reduction and climate change as industry players, because we're actually competing against time, and the urgency is very present. So that, I think I'll leave it with that. Everything we do counts, not only in companies, but in our own personal lives. And I think Malaysia is well on track to being a sustainable flagship for the region. Very proud to be a part of that.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. And the insights around how you are incentivizing some of your employees across the organization on carbon targets, that's really interesting. And I'm sure that would be good and useful insight for the audience here. So taking cognizance of time, we have about 10 minutes left, and I can see a few questions which have already come through. So interestingly, Karen, the first question is for you specifically. So I'll read it out. So does Shell see itself as an oil and gas company, or is there a shift towards becoming an energy company that is ability to transition to clean energy? You also mentioned investing in carbon sinks. So curious if that means also in Malaysia and what that might entail.
That the transition to power and electrification of power is a key part of our strategy, as many of you in Malaysia are aware of the transition to gas as a transition fuel to support the energy transition. And then also, again, the investment in new fuels. For example, in Malaysia, the biofuel, Shell has started offering the B10 biofuel in line with the regulation and the implementation protocols here, as well as investing in green hydrogen R&D with electrolysis here in Malaysia. So on the question about the carbon sinks, so carbon sinks can either be very heavy industrial investments like carbon capture and storage, or it can be simply letting Mother Nature do what it does best, which is grow trees that breathe carbon dioxide and then sequester it. And we do have investments in both of those areas across the globe. In Malaysia, we have an MOU around the carbon forestry carbon sinks, and we've also explored over the years CCS. Where CCS is really making quite a large move forward is in the UK, actually. So back to the introduction from His Excellency. In the UK, we're working across industries to build clusters. So what that means is you can find a place where there are a lot of emissions from industry, where there is a logical sink for carbon, i.e. a depleted gas field, and a transport infrastructure for carbon, pipelines, and together, by collaborating across industry, able to do something that has the economy of scale to make it a worthwhile investment. So that's the type of value chain or business model that we're exploring primarily around the North Sea, but also in North America. And that's the type of value chain or business model that could also work in parts of Southeast Asia.
Thanks, Karen. Moving on to the next question. So this is for Mark. So how does Smith & Nephew get comfort that natural materials used in production are sourced from truly sustainable sources? And how rigorous does the company conduct checks on the supply chain if this is done? Over to you, Mark. Mark, sorry, I think we cannot hear you.
I'll blame the mute button again.
Yeah,
Can
now
you
it's
hear me
fine.
okay?
So for a minute, I thought that it's probably something on our side.
Yeah, no, it was on mine. I apologize.
Sure.
So I think it's pretty clear. We're really focusing on areas where we know we can have an immediate impact, and that's really on things like our packaging materials. And we know where we're sourcing those materials very well. We know the content of those materials in which we are procuring them. And there's really a goal of ours to ensure that those materials are either, from a renewable source there, or we're reducing the overall need for them. I think there was a recent project that we put in place to reduce the overall amount of plastic waste that we generate as part of our packaging and those types of things, as well as, like I said, where we're sourcing the actual, materials and fibers that go into the products themselves. A little bit of some of our challenges that we're working with, metals and those types of things that we need to make sure that they're of the highest level of quality, and obviously there's a challenge there on that front. But from a packaging front, I think that's the biggest area that we're focusing on right now to make the biggest impact and have the biggest win for us and the customer and the environment.
Thanks. So I can see one more question which is there, and this is for PNB. Thank you, Mahmud. Yeah. So the question is that for PNB, investment in infrastructure projects many times find it difficult in raising financing due to the long payback period. Secondly, we face problems in raising financing due to the mismatch in collateral value versus amounts wish to be raised. Kindly advise the best approach.
I think, thank you. I think in any project, I think there certainly need to have an equity portion. So in our case, this project certainly is quite a long gestation period from design to construction and so on. So I think to share with you, we have like a 30-70 arrangement, 30% equity, 70% financing. So I think typically in any infrastructure projects too, I think there is a need for the developers or owners themselves to bring some capital into the project. So I think so I think that is one of the key requirements that to let the financiers know that we are also committed to make sure that the whatever projects that we have will be completed on time, on schedule, and within the budgeted cost, I think. So I think there's no shortcut to this. Certainly, the collaterals are needed and so on. So I think it is part of the, I guess, the business way of financing infrastructure projects or like ours. Yeah.
Thank you. So I can see we just have 2 minutes left. So there's something which I wanted to ask, and it's very relevant vis-a-vis the current pandemic and the COVID situation as well. So and this is an open question to any of the 3 esteemed panelists. That do you think that the COVID pandemic is an opportunity or a barrier for companies which are thinking of investing in the climate change agenda? So, Karen, I can see you smiling, so probably you want to answer that one.
Sure, just a couple of points there. The first point is that actually it was during COVID that we announced our most ambitious aspiration here, because we didn't feel that COVID changed the game in terms of the energy transition in any way, shape or form. And then the second thing that's happened during the COVID pandemic, and this has happened across the energy sector, is that we've realized that our retail networks, so Shell is actually a larger retailer than Starbucks worldwide, if you can believe that. And our retail networks are a huge opportunity to invest in local supply chains and really support local producers keeping their economies going during times like this. So I think being able to really leverage the integrated company, its full value chain, as well as these retail sites that are themselves, often in rural areas who are dependent on logistics for access to markets. That has been a really exciting development that I've seen over the last few months.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. And ladies and gentlemen, finally, we have come to the end part, and I would like to thank all of the panelists who have joined us for the information shared and the insightful discussions. I hope that our audience is able to gain and adapt from these best practices. Thank you and stay safe.
Thank you, Bilal, and our esteemed speakers for the informative session. We hope that your inputs would be valuable for companies who are dealing with green investments. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now taking... Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our Green Conference 2020, brought to you by BMCC and Standard Chartered Malaysia. The topic of discussion for our next panel will be Sustainable Finance, a Blueprint for Green Recovery. Our speakers will be elaborating more on the role and scopes of sustainable finance, as well as the challenges and opportunities in achieving green recovery. Another friendly reminder that you can only submit questions through Slido by scanning the QR code on the screen. Questions submitted through the public chat or Q&A functions at the bottom of the screens may not be captured. Let me now introduce Mr. Pramod Das, the Deputy Group Chief Executive Officer of RAM Holdings Berhad, who will be moderating the session now. Over to you, Pramod.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. My name is Pramod. I couldn't hear the MC, so I will just do a quick roll call here. We have Daniel Hanna from StanChart. We have Gilles Pascal from EY, Program Director for ASEAN Low Carbon Energy Program. Dr. Adam Ng from the WWF, Datin Sri Sunita from Climate Governance Initiative, and I'm Pramod from RAM Holdings. Okay, it's that time of the afternoon where you're just about to fall asleep, but we are going to kickstart and renew that feeling for green in all of you. So I'm going to have this quick warm-up round, asking the same question to each of the fellow panelists, and I'll start off with Daniel. What is StanChart's version of a green recovery? Tell us what you think from your perch from London.
So I think a green recovery is a couple of things. I think first of all, and if you pardon the use of words, the green recovery is the most sustainable type of recovery that we can possibly have coming out of the pandemic. The increasing amount of evidence is showing that the amount of new jobs that will be created through new technologies like the spread of renewables or into areas like hydrogen is going to create potentially a number of very high-tech, sustainable jobs that will help raise living standards. I think the second thing that we've seen this year is the outperformance of ESG investments. So we've seen continued inflows despite the correction in global markets into ESG funds. And indeed, on our wealth platform, the single biggest fund in, say, June, July, at the height of the pandemic in Europe, was the SDG aligned debt fund. And we just recently completed a survey of $50 trillion of investors who sit on $50 trillion of assets under management. And all of those investors who were aware of sustainable finance and the UN Sustainable Development Goals wanted to increase their amount of exposure towards sustainable finance, towards a green recovery. So I think a green recovery is not only realistic, but is actually going to be the most sustainable and the most sustained recovery that an economy can really point towards.
Great. Gilles, over to you. The same question. What is green recovery to EY?
Well, hopefully it's a set of fiscal stimulus and policies that will either accelerate the sectors that are already green, or that will target the brown sector in transitioning them. It's a set of policies and stimulus that will create jobs that are sustainable in the long term, and that will put Malaysia on its path for Paris Agreement targets. And hopefully it's also a set of policies that will create an inclusive growth, meaning that we don't only focus on peninsular Malaysia, but we also take into account the idiosyncrasies of Sabah and Sarawak. And that is also targeted not only at the large companies, but also flow through the micro and the SMEs. And we'll develop over the next 40 minutes all these items.
All right. And Dr. Adam, your point of view on the green recovery. Of course, you're coming from the WWF's perspective. We have interacted on this topic many occasions. I'd like to hear your viewpoint on this.
Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah. So let me
Go
just
ahead,
begin
Daniel.
with the premise that human health depends on planetary health. It's not a cliche, it's actually very true, given that COVID-19 is one of the prominent zoonotic diseases. And zoonotic diseases, in terms of the root causes, we are quite clear in terms of the unethical way of eating, as well as deforestation that brings human and animals closer together. So from this premise, there are basically three propositions from a WWF perspective, among others. First, it's important for the green recovery to align the nationally determined contributions, NDCs, with a post-COVID-19 world. This is important because it will help to create the much needed pathway towards a net zero emission and to avert future economic and social shocks from climate change. Some studies have shown that the impact of climate change will be even much more severe compared to the current COVID-19 crisis. The second proposition is it's important to build a nature-positive economic recovery with nature-based solution as a force of green and resilient recovery. By WWF and the International Labour Organization on nature hires highlighted that there are about 1.2 billion jobs in sectors such as farming, fisheries, forestry, tourism. They're highly dependent on an effective management and healthy ecosystem. In fact, in the Live on Planet report, half of the world GDP is to a large extent dependent on nature. So it's key to link economic recovery to countries' climate as well as biodiversity commitments based on science and based on a whole of government approach. The final proposition, again, not the least, is to unleash the potential of finance or sustainable finance to green the recovery. What is meant by this is that sustainable finance plays an important role to build back better by creating win-win-win, triple wins in terms of job creation, social benefits for the poorest, and public health. These include clean physical infrastructure investment, clean R&D investment, climate smart agriculture, and so on. So these are the three propositions that from the WWF angle, would like to see how the green recovery would be anchored on going forward. Thank you.
I have one question before I jump to Dato Sri Sunita. I would like to place the question with Daniel and Gilles first, and I'll come back to you. Have you dealt with WWF in your various markets, and what sort of interaction have you had? So, Sunita, back to you, the same question. So, think about it while I come back.
What does green recovery mean to me? So, as you know, Pramod, I sit on a few boards, and I've been very active with Climate Governance Malaysia, which is the World Economic Forum country chapter for the Climate Governance Initiative. For me, I look at the green recovery as an opportunity really for us to press the reset button, because there's such an urgent need to decarbonize the economy that even if we were to stop all carbon emissions this year, it would take more than 10 years for us to reverse the cumulative effect of warming that is currently taking place. That even in a lockdown that's taken place almost in every country in the world, we're only reducing carbon emissions by 8 to 9% this year. So there's still a long way more to go. And even if every country in the world has committed to Paris, including the US, hopefully they'll get back in again, and we've committed to 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees targets, the minimum rate of warming now that we're looking at is possibly 2.3 degrees Celsius. So I think there's such an urgent need to decarbonize the economy. And I hope that as many people as possible, all of society, looks at the green economy as an opportunity to reset.
Okay. Daniel and Gilles, any stories in interacting with WWF in your market?
Go ahead, Daniel.
No, after you, please.
So, from our end, I'm a partner at EY, but I also manage the ASEAN Low Carbon Energy Program, which is an ODA program of the UK government, the Prosperity Fund. In Malaysia, we're supporting a number of interventions along green finance and energy efficiency. And we are working with WWF in supporting the Joint Committee on Climate Change that I think has been mentioned a couple of times in the opening speeches, that for which WWF is helping the subcommittee on capacity building. So we're working with the WWF on providing capacity building on financial institutions, on taking into account climate change risk management, portfolio stress testing, and organizing a number of events for financial institutions.
Daniel?
So, yes, no, thank you very much. And we've got a very active dialogue with WWF on a number of different areas. I think maybe just to break it down into three, I think the first is, as a financial institution that's very committed to supporting sustainability, we also believe in the importance of sort of effectively walking the talk. So we have our own net zero commitment in our operations by 2030, and we're also measuring and managing and ultimately reducing the emissions created by our financing. So let's say we lend 100% of a national oil company's financing, we will take responsibility for 100% of the emissions created through those works. And so we've engaged with a number of NGOs and WWF as well in terms of how, as an institution, we can effectively support through what we're doing as a bank, the transition. So that's kind of one set. The second set is I manage the bank's growth in sustainable finance, so looking for creative solutions to see how we can really turbocharge sustainability and helping clients transition to low carbon business models. And in that, I think WWF have a number of really interesting and innovative practices. And the area actually that we haven't talked about, but is maybe flagging, that we've probably spoke most with WWF is actually around the blue economy. So we did the world's first blue bond with the Republic of Seychelles around creating a sustainable ocean economy. Now, the ocean creates 50% of the world's oxygen, captures 25% of the world's carbon, gets little attention compared to, say, green issues. Yet I think is also very much an underpinning of a healthy planet. So we're very keen to develop sort of sustainable oceans and blue as a financing thing, and we've been working very closely with the WWF on that as well. So maybe let me pause at those two and let others talk.
Well, the reason why I asked that is I wouldn't be in this session if not for WWF. I've been working in a rating agency for the last 20 years, and one day I got this email from WWF, which I almost deleted, thinking it was spam, but luckily it led to a meeting. They taught me about sustainable finance, but I think the key point that I want to talk about is that to have a green recovery, you need to have catalysts in every sort of sector and every sort of institution. And I think all of us here are catalysts in our own ways, and there are many more catalysts out there. But I think before we go into the topic proper about green recovery, I think it's very important to have champions in different organizations, in different strata, in different parts of the world, and as many varied organizations as you can. And coming to the my first question. I mean, we talk about green recovery. Countries are going through really an economic meltdown. Some sectors are almost being wiped out. I mean, we're all waiting for the vaccine. So companies have enough to contend with. Is a green recovery realistic? Sunita, I'll let you go first for this one.
I think it's definitely a very challenging time to be talking about this. But I think in Malaysia, at least, you'll be pleasantly surprised. The regulators are very much on board, from the Prudential Regulators, Securities Commission to the Stock Exchange. They're very supportive of this agenda. And the conversation now is the level of disclosure that we want. The CEOs of some of the large and influential companies are also very much on board. So what's recently been launched is a CEO Action Network, where a group of these thought leaders are saying, we're not going to wait for government, we're not going to wait for regulation or the capital markets or even investors. We want to take the lead. And of course, at climate governance, it's even non-executive directors who are stepping up to take the lead. So yes, it needs all of society, all of economy approach. And I'm really gratified to see many stakeholders stepping up to meet this challenge, including NGOs. We've had a great working relationship with WWF, which is arguably the most organized NGO in the country, and they really set levels of climate ambition that help guide us.
Jules, what's your take on whether
Well,
it's realistic for green recovery right now?
true. I mean, if you're the CEO of a company, you have enough fires to attend to, especially for an SME where survival is not just post-COVID. Survival for an SME is practically every day, every week, right? Now, for a green recovery, you have a couple of change agents, as you mentioned. It's the allocation of capital, so the financial institutions. It's the government through policy making, and it's your customers. So in Malaysia, if we look at the financial institutions, as Datin Sunita just mentioned, the regulators are extremely active. Whether it's the development of sustainable finance, whether it's the introduction of climate disclosures, there is a lot of activity ongoing, and everyone here on the panel are active on that front. The government can play a part as part of the budget that has been announced. There are a number of policy levers that the government can force onto the market. So then it's down to the corporates. And you're right, as a CEO, you have a lot to do. Now, the demand of the customers are only going to get more pressing. So it's actually not a choice; it's a must.
So Daniel, is a green recovery something with a different meaning for the people in Europe or the UK, and it's supposed to mean something for us differently in ASEAN? And all of you can jump in on.
It's a great question, actually, and we did a survey at the height of the pandemic a few months ago of high net worth individuals across Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, and effectively we asked them this question, which is, what is sustainability? What does sustainable finance? What does a green recovery mean to you? And actually, there wasn't really a geographic difference, and so I think we often talk about certain regions being ahead or behind other regions, but actually, I think you're now seeing a real focus across the board, quite uniformly. As Gilles just talked about, surveys show that 80% of customers are now prepared to pay a premium for a good that is sustainable or green. And actually that is, again, whether it's in Asia, whether it's in Latin America, whether it's in Europe, is pretty much there as well. I think what we have seen slightly, if you like, particularly in Europe, is just the regulators have moved a little bit quicker. And I think the EU Sustainable Finance Taxonomy is probably the most robust, comprehensive and cohesive part of regulation that we've seen in this space. But there are now active discussions going on in Malaysia, going on in Asia, going on in many other regions around effectively how we can all learn from that sort of ecosystem that the Europeans are developing and then apply it into the local context. Because I think there is a significant difference in terms of what a green recovery practically means in somewhere like, say, Malaysia than, say, it does in a European country. But if you like, I think the intent, the focus, I don't really see that much of a difference. And the one point I would sort of make is it's very rare that you get consumers, investors, and regulators all saying something is going to be important. So for any company out there that's thinking about, I mean, given the challenges of this year, and we're all aware of those challenges, is this something that I can really afford? I actually think it's the other way around. I think if you really want a long-term future and a successful future, this is something you frankly can't afford not to be taking seriously now.
Yeah.
Sunita, go ahead.
So, Pramod, there is a difference in terms of level of awareness at a government level. So around the world, we have 126 governments that are committed to net carbon zero. But in Asia, it's really the three giants, China, Japan, Korea. So while we're having conversations locally in the region, In the G20 countries, for example, they're already quite advanced in terms of what is needed to decarbonize the economy. And so one of the topical issues is carbon border adjustments, because do you want to be accused of setting net zero targets and then outsourcing your emissions to other countries which haven't set these targets yet? And so the longer we wait to come to the table to manage this transition, the more disruptive it's going to be to businesses. And this is why I think, especially in this part of the world, we need to have this conversation sooner rather than later. And this green recovery is a great opportunity for us to be able to do that.
Gilles, are you able, and Adam, are you able to link on that point? What happens in different countries matter, whether they happen at the same time, whether the standards are the same. How can governments work together to get this done?
Yeah, we can add on that point. So I think the need for having a standardized taxonomy that is science-based and robust is key, because harmonization would attract more investors and also reduce arbitrage. So that would be from a taxonomy standpoint, in which the central bank as well as the financial industry is now working on developing the climate change principle-based taxonomy. Yeah, but I would like to add on a bit more on whether the green recovery is relevant now or whether it's realistic. So we have seen a number of studies that have shown that, for example, the one by McKinsey have shown that the number of jobs created by renewable energy and energy efficiency is, for example, 75 to 77 jobs compared to fossil fuel, which is 27 jobs. The multiplier effect of a 100 billion capital mobilization would yield a 2 times gross value added if it's pumped into low carbon stimulus portfolio. So there are enough, and drawing on Daniel's point, I think a couple of days ago, there was also another research by Robeco, which is an asset management company, that actually shows that SDG compliant stocks and sectors, those with positive impact, basically was more resilient. And the interesting part of it was not just from a risk return perspective, but also from a credit perspective. So they were more creditworthy as well. So given the dynamics of the COVID-19, where we see a number of companies, especially the SMEs, suffering from potential high default rate, this kind of findings might give some green insight into the importance of being resilient from an SDG or green perspective in order to be credit-worthy as well.
Can I interject on that point? Because quite often figures and are cited that, if you invest in green, it always gives you better returns and so on. But very rarely when these figures are quoted, sectors are mentioned, and whether there's sector bias that is actually creating that uptick. I don't know, but maybe Daniel and Gilles, you want to comment on that? Because I like to get to the heart of the matter. Is going green really more profitable for the investor? Is it, and that will tie in where companies and corporates then start positioning and having better cost of funding if it goes green, because investors will move that way. But let's get to the heart of the matter.
Jules, you want to go first?
Okay, so I'll have a go. Pramod, actually, I will have a go at your last two questions, if I can. Why it matters what other countries are doing. So we've talked about the EU taxonomy, and there's a lot of talks now in Asia, in Southeast Asia, or in Malaysia, whether we need a taxonomy in this part of the world. But we need to pay, regardless of where that discussion go, we do need to pay attention as to the EU taxonomy, in the sense that it will drive equity investments. So if you're a listed company, you need to see what is your foreign shareholding and who holds your stock, because they might have to sell your stock if you don't act in accordance with the EU taxonomy, or if you are already green, you can promote your stock and get new sources of capital. So looking at what the other countries matter. A second example as to what the other countries, it's important to look at that. And I always use the example of, can you get 100% renewable electricity in Malaysia? More and more, FDI will decide investing in a country where it can get 100% green energy. If Malaysia doesn't put in place the policies that allow a customer to be 100% green, that FDI might go to Thailand, or might go to Singapore, or might go to Vietnam or the Philippines, if those countries allow you to be 100% green. So again, if you are to attract FDI and create jobs, you do need to look at what the other countries are doing. You need to join the dialogue. So that was for your first question. And your second question, Pramod, was on the cost of funding.
I think it was maybe if I come in here. So I think, Pramod, your question, which I think is a good one, is lots of numbers get quoted around ESG outperformance. Can you really trust them? And I have to say, lots of numbers get quoted in sustainable finance about emissions created, about ESG outperformance, and I do agree you need to drive into it. One of the single biggest drivers of the ESG outperformance this year has been, frankly, that oil and gas has just done so badly. And so really, just by being in ESG, you avoided oil and gas stocks, and that naturally led to an outperformance. So I do think we need to just, as you say, drill into the numbers a little bit. But I think there is growing evidence outside of that. Rebecca mentioned there was a Morningstar report that looked at 5, 3, and 1 years of outperformance as well. But actually, forget the outperformance of the stock market, which is backward looking. Look at where the flow of funds is going right now. ESG ETFs, just to take one example, have seen an upsurge of funds every month this year, even during the correction that we saw on global stock markets. Standard Chartered launched a Sustainable Development Goal aligned deposit program across our wholesale bank and our consumer bank. And we have now seen $2 billion of inflows into that program. And the single biggest inflow that we had was at March, when a lot of companies were scrambling for cash flow at the time. So I think if you just follow the money, if you like, you will see that, and I think this is something that Jill was talking about, you will see this kind of capital chasing these sort of assets. And I think that's a big opportunity, really. And I mean, maybe just on Malaysia, because I do feel we're being a little hard on Malaysia. I mean, I think, Bank Negara, for example, has had its value-based intermediation program for many years. And actually, there is a lot of parallels between the sort of rigor and thought that you need around Islamic finance and the use of proceeds being ring-fenced, and also then sustainable finance. And a good example of that, actually, is we did the world's first transition bond for an airline, which was in Sukuk format for Etihad, and that really combined around effectively tapping into Islamic capital, but then also having very strict transition and sustainability guidelines around electrifying ground fleets and also looking at more efficiencies. So I think Malaysia is moving, but I do agree that I think all companies, frankly, need to move at a greater urgency that we have seen to really make a significant impact. I think Asia is going to be absolutely key over the next 10 years as to whether this planet sees global warming at significantly less 2 degrees or not. And the reality is I think the panel's just said, we're on track for 4 degrees at the moment. So I think it's a real question around how we scale what is already there and really do it as rapidly as possible. And I actually think, I do want to think this is an opportunity. We did a study at the beginning of this year called Opportunity 2030, and we looked at 15 markets, including Malaysia. And our findings show that over the next 10 years, there is a $4.2 trillion private sector opportunity in clean energy. There is a $3.7 trillion opportunity in sustainable transport, or 125 billion opportunity in providing clean water and sanitation. These are opportunities. Sorry.
Sorry to interject, but there was a question from the audience on the water sector and green water sector or sustainable water. What's Standard Chartered's view on the water sector in Malaysia? Is that an area that you would fund? I'm summarizing the question.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Thank you. So I think, I mean, I can't comment, to be honest, on our appetite of Malaysia and clean water. That probably goes beyond my specific domain knowledge. But I have colleagues who will, I'm sure, be able to pick up that question, and we can have a chat, Pramod, afterwards and see how we can do that best. But I would sort of draw the broader analogy, which is that we do see this opportunity in clean water and sanitation, as I mentioned, $125 billion for private sector investment over the next 10 years in markets such as Malaysia. And I think the other interesting thing is we did a survey, as I mentioned, of high net worth individuals, and actually sanitation and clean water came out as their top area of interest in sustainable finance, beating climate. And I think one of the areas of the pandemic that we've seen is obviously, a greater focus on health and sanitation than maybe we had from climate previously in previous years. So I think that the issues around climate and emissions are still very much there, but the pandemic has also brought in these issues around health and sanitation as well.
I have a question here.
Pramod,
Yes, go
Pramod,
ahead.
I'd like to jump in here as well. Because, in looking at it from a returns point of view, I think we might be guilty of the same sort of short-termism that got us into this problem in the first place. So I think we really need to remember what Mark Carney called the tragedy of the horizons. That this appears to be a long-term problem, but we need to invest in turning this aircraft carrier around now. And so looking at short-term returns, I feel may be distracting. The fact of the matter is a huge number of prudential regulators, monetary authorities, in the NGFS, there's 75 members, and they are fully on board that the climate crisis is going to result in a systemic risk to the financial systems. The overwhelming majority of scientists are of the view that if this transition is not managed, it is going to have characteristics of falling off the cliff. Some of our largest businesses in the world have committed to net carbon zero targets, including, of course, Standard Chartered, Barclays, HSBC. Climate Action 100 Plus is a group of 500 institutional investors controlling $50 trillion of assets, and they are demanding that the world's 160 largest emitters need to publish their strategies to net carbon zero. So it's also a question of how many businesses are going to survive this climate emergency. So it's not just about what are the returns that we're seeing in the short term. How many of these businesses are going to survive and are going to be part of this smooth transition?
Okay, I think leading from that point, I have two questions that I'm going to throw to the panel from the audience. How do you get companies, especially local businesses or SMEs, to buy into investing in green businesses? That's the first part of it. What is the first step a business can take towards greening their business? And what is the most impactful thing that they can do?
Well, when I'm speaking to boards as part of why you should buy in, I think sometimes directors need to be aware that it is their responsibility as long-term stewards of the organization to be managing risks. And the climate emergency is a top financial risk that they need to be managing, failing which they could be personally liable. So for businesses that don't understand the risks that they are facing, that don't think there is a need to embed sustainability into the DNA of the business, then the directors need to look hard as to whether they're ready to bear personal liability, because it'll be impossible to claim in a few years' time that you didn't think it was material. And as a matter of fact, there's legal opinion.
Is it fear factor then?
I think it's discharging your responsibility. It's your duty of care, isn't it? And it's going to be impossible for them to claim that they didn't think it was material. As a matter of fact, legal opinion around the world states that if you didn't disclose it in your annual report, the presumption is that you had applied your mind to this, you had concluded it was not material, and that's why it has been omitted. That's where we're at right now.
What about
maybe, if I may, I was just going to build on that a little bit, but maybe reframe as well. I think so. Absolutely. I think the first thing is you have to understand this, right? So this is a big mega trend, if you like, both from a risk and from an opportunity perspective. And I think it's important to keep both in mind at all times. I absolutely agree that this is a substantial risk to all businesses. And as I said, I think this is going to happen much quicker than people kind of anticipate. This is, and we've seen that acceleration over the last 12 months. So I think the first thing is really to understand both climate and the broader ESG impacts your business is having. So one of the things that we've developed over the last couple of years is an ESG advisory service where we can actually walk our clients through kind of how their sort of strategy is working and explain how different sort of people look at this issue. And to be honest, I think the finance industry has not helped people here because there is an alphabet soup of different standards, qualifiers, verifiers, and so it is a complicated space. So I actually have quite a lot of sympathy with companies in trying to get their head around it. But I think you need to understand it, your staff need to understand it, you need to then be able to communicate it. So the first one is understanding. Second then is measuring. You need to put in place PMI. And actually one of the things that I think about companies that often doesn't get realized is the most important function you have in a company to make you green is your finance function. Because if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? So you have to put in place really robust performance management indicators around your ESG factors that you're tracking. And then obviously, ultimately, once you've started measuring it, you then start reducing it. So I'd really start thinking about understanding, measuring, and then thinking about reducing.
So at Climate Governance Malaysia, oh, sorry.
There's one, before we jump in on that, I'll just chime in a question that's directly for you. Will the EU non-financial reporting directive be mandatory for ASEAN companies who are part of the supply chain of EU companies, which means regardless of local reporting and taxonomy, they'll have an issue of reporting to EU taxonomy? I'll put it up on screen now. So basically, if you're part of the supply chain for an EU multinational company, do you have to conform to the European standards, if I sum it up?
Sorry, Pramod, who was that question to? I missed that. Was that to me or?
Gilles. For Gilles. But any one of you can jump in.
That was a long one, Pramod. Is there any way you can flash it on the screen? Because I can't see it. It's a curved ball. Thank you, Pramod.
Gilles, maybe while it's being flashed, maybe if I may, just add a couple of comments.
Please.
So I actually think this issue is going to be really pertinent, particularly to Malaysia. And actually, it got mentioned earlier about and how companies are thinking about FDI. Supply chain management is going to be an important critical aspect. If you look at major companies, let's say Microsoft, they have pledged to not just go neutral in terms of carbon emissions, but negative. And the way they're doing that incorporates their supply chain. So at every step of the way, they need to be able to effectively measure and then certify that there have been steps being taken. So irrespective of the regulatory trend, I actually think we're going to see this being pushed down supply chain quite significantly. And for someone that is as well integrated as Malaysia is into the global economy, this is definitely a factor. Carbon tariffs also got mentioned. I do think that is also something that is likely to happen both in the European and the American side in the not too distant future. And so I think incorporating all of this is going to be really important. And it's one of the things that as a bank, we're looking at how we can help supply chain finance effectively companies transition as part of that process.
Gilles, I can't get it to come.
No, but that's fine. I got the gist of it through Daniel's, and I echo what Daniel just said. It kind of links to your previous question as to why should a corporate buy in and how they can do it. Is legal obligation or not? If it's not already a legal obligation, it will soon be. Either because you're a listed company and the disclosure will require you to do it, or the government will start taxing carbon, or will implement some other measures, or your customers are going to demand it, either the retail or, as Daniel just mentioned, if you're part of a logistics chain and you're supplying to a client that itself has signed up to a number of those initiatives. So it's not so much why should you buy in, is why you should not buy in. Now, how to do it, it looks daunting, but once you get into the details and you get the right support, it's actually not that complex. We've done, just take the example of green bonds. Initially, perhaps 18 months ago, everyone was wondering, how do you do green bonds? And it looks complex. You do a 2-hour workshop on green bonds and you realize actually It's just a bond with a certification process, and the certification is pretty simple. Whether my project is eligible or not, it's actually easy to determine. Just get the right support. WWF runs a number of events. EY, as part of running the UK low carbon energy program, we are doing a number of events working with financial institutions. We are supporting corporates who want to transition their business. So explaining TCFD's, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. It looks complex. Honestly, it's a couple of hours workshop to get to know the basics, and you will realize that transitioning is definitely doable.
Sunita and Adam, I have a question for both of you. Sunita, you sit on an MNC corporate board, and I think even a local company as well. Is there a difference how a Malaysian-based company and an MNC looks at green or the promise of moving green? And Adam, from your perspective, when you deal with institutions that are either Malaysian-based or multinationals, is there a difference and how they hear you out?
Okay, so I'll answer the first question. I sit on 3 MNC boards and 1 local board, MNC meaning owned by a foreign company. And while holding company has set targets, it hasn't really cascaded down to the subsidiary yet, strangely enough. So I think as a region, as a country, we really seem to be falling behind in this conversation. Like I said earlier, we have regulators, we have the monetary authority, the central bank, and we do have some CEOs who are stepping up to take ownership of this. But definitely, there's a long way to go in this very complicated transition. Someone had asked the question earlier, what can local companies do? So from Climate Governance Malaysia's point of view, we encourage companies to just start measuring 4 things, which is your greenhouse gas footprint, wastewater, energy. So at least if you can start measuring this, and I think what we will also be recommending is shadow pricing, because that's a very easy way to see how not decarbonizing is going to have an impact on your business, because it's inevitable. There are over 100 jurisdictions in the world that have some form of carbon tax already implemented. So it's inevitable this is going to take place. A company like Swiss Re that used to use only $8 per metric ton has announced that it's going to use $100 starting from next year. So this is the scale of the pivot that's going to be required. So there's a lot that you can do internally, as Daniel had summarized, understanding and measuring. This can be done now.
Adam, your thought?
Maybe I would tweak the question from foreign versus local to size, big ones versus small ones, because there's more material from the angle. Of course, if you're a foreign company or foreign financial institution, you have the advantage of leveraging on your global best practices, like the likes of SemChart and HSBC in Malaysia. But maybe if we look at it from a size perspective, I mean, the largest banks in the country, or the companies in the country, would obviously have wider and bigger exposure, right? And also, if you're large enough, you also have more diversified segments of portfolio. So if you're a small financial institution that focuses on retail banking, then your exposure to oil and gas might be somewhat limited compared to if you're a large financial institution, you finance large oil and gas companies and so on. So size matters, and therefore we are seeing large financial institutions embarking on this sustainability journey more seriously. It also depends on the composition of the shareholders of the institution. If you have foreign investors, or if your stocks are being held by foreign investors, then obviously there's also the importance of not just investor relation, but also the importance of managing the expectation that foreign asset owners or investors would have. The other component is that if you are large enough, you will also have resources and capacity to dedicate a department on sustainability, or invest in consultants or experts to help you build capacity. And therefore, the regulators and policymakers will also have that kind of expectation that if you are the larger companies, you are also expected to lead. So these factors would then therefore drive the larger companies to move forward the curve, and therefore the spillover effect would then come down to the smaller firms and for smaller financial institutions.
Okay, we are in our last 10 minutes, and now I'm going for the jugular. What exactly do we need to do? Do we need to push our governments to press on the green agenda? Should we have hard regulations in Asia and ASEAN? Or should it still be capital markets driven? Let the money talk and push the green agenda. I suppose we would like to hear your thoughts from Europe, and Sunita and Adam can give the Asian perspective. But I also want to hear what worked in Europe and what didn't work, and maybe we can skip the challenges that Europe had and go and fix problems straight away. So Daniel, maybe you can kickstart it.
Sure. So I think I think we need to do three things collectively, and this is very much a collective challenge. So I don't think this is about the private sector doing something, capital markets doing something, or the government doing something. I think we all have to do something. We're in a massive transition that requires collaboration of the likes that we haven't seen before. And I think the good news is that there are a lot of, if you like, green shoots that point towards how we can do it. And I don't think Europe has all the answers, actually. I think there's been some successes, but actually, if you look at the single largest private sector auction market in the world for solar, that's in India. If you look at the country that's probably done more to reduce the renewable costs in the world, it's probably China. Yes. And if you look at a number of innovations in terms of, as I mentioned, sort of thinking about how you can tap into Islamic finance through sustainability, I think Bank of Negara has been doing that for a couple of years. So I think we do need to see a collective coordination, and absolutely, ideally, we need to be thinking about how regulation kind of comes together. And I think governments need to be pivoting towards this as well. But I would say three things in total. So the first thing is we need to catalyze a lot more sustainable finance. The gap to financing Paris is probably around $2 to $3 trillion a year globally. And so even with the record amounts going into things like green bonds, we are still just scratching the surface. So as a collective force, we need to think about how you can really drive the amount of capital that is going into this kind of green revolution and to transition high carbon businesses into low carbon business. So that's the first thing. I think very much we then need to standardize. We are very worried around the issues of greenwashing or SDG washing, or people claiming to be doing things when they're not actually. So I think having standards, regulations is a really important thing. We're a big supporter of the Task Force for Climate Financial Disclosures, TCFD, and expanding that. But also I think we're a very big proponent of the markets coming together and setting standards. Since the green bond standards have been created, we've seen green bonds go up sevenfold. We need to see similar standards in a variety of other areas, whether it's on blue bonds or gender bonds or everything else. So I think that sort of standardization is also important. And then the third thing is we need to democratize. A lot of this sustainable finance at the moment is in the developed markets, but actually it's in the emerging markets that we need to see that shift. And frankly, it's the emerging markets that will drive whether this planet goes from 4 degrees of global warming to substantially less than 2. And here I think it's really important that there is a public-private partnership and things like blended finance, so mixing public capital with commercial capital to really drive new areas is going to be absolutely critical.
I need to pause you there, and I want to ask Jules this question. You've seen the latest Malaysian budget and all the sustainability points put in there, and so would Adam and Datin Sunita. What are your quick thoughts? I know that immediately after this, we have the Minister of Finance talking about the implications of the budget and green. But what are your thoughts? What have you seen in other countries? What have we done well, and what can we do more? And Daniel, jump later as well.
One thought from me. I think, the energy efficiency sector is often the child that you don't look after. But there are a lot of savings that can be generated on energy efficiency, and there's a lot of jobs that can be created. If you have the right policies that flows through down to the SMEs, there's a lot of jobs that can be created. So, one comment from me is ideally a bit more incentives on energy efficiency, and in particular on government buildings.
Sunita?
I think the government has a lot of other priorities. I was expecting a lot more in terms of the environmental incentives. So, for example, for forest conservation, net carbon zero targets, how to decarbonize our grid, to mandate climate risk reporting, that impose carbon tax or even shadow pricing. And of course, incentives for not just renewable energy, energy efficiency, building efficiency. All of these are low-hanging fruits that didn't really require that much funding from the government.
Adam, in 30 seconds, what's your view?
Yeah. I think in other countries like France, they have recently done the budget tagging exercise that's very science-based and is also linked to the EU taxonomy. I think we have discussed this multiple times. And they have also earmarked how many % of their budget is green and how many are still brown or dark. So I think
Adam, are you still there? Okay, I think we've lost Adam. It's 4:30. I'm going to do a quick 1 minute point from each of you to end the session. I'll let Sunita go first.
Businesses are recognizing that changing consumer preferences and new climate policies are creating the greatest commercial opportunity of our time. This is the beginning of a journey, a multi-decade transition that's deeply complicated. This is the decisive decade of humanity. And so we all need to come together. It's an all-of-society approach where we need to seize this opportunity for a green recovery.
Gilles, your final words? I think he couldn't hear. So Daniel, over to you then. Until Gilles.
Thank you very much. Well, I mean, great panel and well moderated. And so all I will say is this is both a risk and an opportunity. And I think really to seize this, we need to catalyze, standardize, and democratize sustainable finance.
Thank you. Gilles, could you hear me? Your final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm back. Well, it's to ensure buy-in. I think, standards or no standards, taxonomy or taxonomy. The point is that we need to get past the buy-in. And there's a lot of people that are willing to support that transition, whether it's board member like that in Sunita, whether it's NGOs, your friendly banker at Standard Chartered, or consultant like me. We're always there to assist with the transition.
Okay. We've lost Adam and he's been replaced by someone else, but I will
Ambassador.
I'll end the session now with some words. I think that I'll try and run off what WWF has probably said in different forums. When the killing stops, when the buying stops, the killing stops. But when you can influence money, then green really moves. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you to our panel speakers and moderator for the noteworthy contributions to the topic discussion. I believe that we are now capturing the new possibilities and reinvigorating the aspiration towards a more sustainable future. I am sure our participants will agree. We will now take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Thank you so much for staying with us. I know our next session is a highly anticipated one. The session will feature perspectives from two nations, Malaysia and the UK, on sustainability. We were all looking forward to engaging with the Lord Mayor of the City of London. However, we have just been informed, due to personal unforeseen circumstances beyond the Lord Mayor's control, he is unable to join us. Stepping in for the Lord Mayor, we are truly grateful. to have His Excellency Charles Hay, MVO, British High Commissioner to Malaysia, to join this special session. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the highlight of this crane conference. In this session, we'll be hearing on the perspectives, as I mentioned before. Joining us are YB, Tengku Dato Sri Zafrul, bin Tengku Abdul Aziz, Minister of Finance Malaysia, and His Excellency Charles Hay. I will now pass the session to Abrar, who will be moderating the session. Abrar, over to you.
Thank you, Mastura. YB Dato Sri Tengku Zafrul, the Finance Minister of Malaysia, His Excellency Charles Hay, MVO, British High Commissioner to Malaysia, ladies and gentlemen, hello once again to all our participants from Malaysia, around the region, as well as from the UK. I do hope that you have found the sessions insightful so far. It's my sincerest pleasure to moderate our final and special session of our inaugural BMCC Conference 2020. YB Tengku Zafrul and His Excellency Charles Hay, we are honored to have you both on this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, as we navigate the current global crisis from COVID-19 in business and in our personal lives, and take tentative steps towards recovery and normality, one main takeaway from this crisis is that it has turned our attention to business resilience and strengthening a transition to a sustainable economic model. The realization to attain sustainability and embrace sustainable finance as an economic recovery mechanism is becoming clearer. Governments such as the UK government itself has included green measures such as grants, loans, and tax reliefs in its crisis recovery packages. In Malaysia, we are also very pleased that the recent Malaysian National Budget 2021 focused on sustainability and was aligned with the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. The proposal for the issuance of Malaysia's first sustainability bond and the establishment of Malaysia SDG Trust puts Malaysia in the right direction towards achieving the SDG targets. I'm sure we will hear more about both governments' efforts from our esteemed speakers shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, this crisis has raised genuine questions about the resilience and security of the global financial systems. A positive outcome has been that analysts and economists are now seeing trends on how green finance has helped companies to cope better during this crisis and how sustainable finance can be a blueprint towards green recovery. This virtual conference is a commitment by BMCC and Standard Chartered Malaysia in affirming our belief in significance of championing the green agenda to drive sustainable growth. At Standard Chartered, we have a long commitment to sustainable finance. The services we provide contribute towards the delivery of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And we are also a proud member of the Joint Committee of Climate Change led by Bank Negara and Securities Commission, Malaysia, to work together to understand climate change risks and develop tools to effectively respond to those risks. At BMCC, we will continue to advocate our business community to make the commitments in tackling the climate change. With that, let's move on to our session. Please allow me to share a brief background of YB Dato Sri Tengku Zafrul. YB has over 22 years of experience in the financial services sector before being appointed as the Finance Minister of Malaysia in March 2020. Previously, he was the Group Chief Executive Officer, Executive Director of CIMB Group Holdings Berhad, and has held various senior positions with Maybank, Investment Bank, Citigroup Malaysia, and Kenanga Holdings Berhad, to name a few. Now it is my pleasure to welcome YB Dato Sri Tengku Zafrul, the Finance Minister of Malaysia, to deliver his remarks. Thank you, YB.
Thank you, Abrar, and congratulations on your appointment as the BMCC chairman. You look very comfortable sitting there. Okay. Your Excellency, Charles Hay, the British High Commissioner to Malaysia. And good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me as one of the guests today. Firstly, allow me to share some details of the budget 2021 that was announced on the 6th of and the sustainability elements that Abrar touched on, which I touched on as well in the budget recently. Amidst a COVID-19 environment, we announced the largest budget in its history at 322.5 billion ringgit. An expansionary and counter-cyclical budget focuses on three main objectives. Firstly, well-being. Secondly, business continuity and economic resilience. Government's goal is to safeguard economy now while continuing to invest in the future through digitalization and innovation, as well as raising awareness, sustainability, and the circular economy. Some of the measures in the budget 2021 include control of the spread of COVID-19, obviously, more than 4 billion ringgit just allocated on containing the virus. They've also increased the allocation for education and healthcare, strengthen our commitment towards the society's well-being. At this time, the budget also focused on the vulnerable groups and to enhance the social safety net. This ranges from direct assistance, such as the 6.5 billion ringgit cash assistance for Bantuan Prihatin, or Bantuan Prihatin Rakyat, wider scope of health insurance coverage as well as comprehensive job search allowance for retrenched workers who are looking for jobs. We are also enhancing our job creation initiative in the formation of the National Jobs Council, targeting 500,000 new jobs, and the continuation of an improved wage subsidy program, skilling and reskilling program, and all this costing the government around 3.7 billion ringgit. High impact projects are also being to ensure inclusivity, knowledge gap, also incentivizing digitalization, implementing the 7.4 billion ringgit National Digital Network Initiative to upgrade our national digital infrastructure. This includes schools, 430 of schools, 25 industrial parks as well. Another 15 billion ringgit is allocated to continue with our transport infrastructure. Pan-Borneo Highway, up to 3. Malaysia also plans to resume negotiations with Singapore on the KL Singapore high-speed rail. At the same time, we understand the importance of sustainability in the equation, right? As a country rich in natural resources, and one of the 12 mega diverse countries in the world, Malaysia must balance between development and the preservation of environment. We are, of course, among the signatories as well of the 2030 Agenda and the 17 SDGs. So as mentioned by Abrar just now, for the first time, many of our budget will actually be met to the 17 SDGs. We understand that these goals will help us move towards a more prosperous, sustainable, and inclusive future. Some of the measures that have been announced will help Malaysia in specific areas of sustainability in the shorter to medium term. Some of the measures announced include 25 million ringgit for the Sustainable Development Agenda, which includes the Malaysia SDG Trust Fund with an allocation of 20 million ringgit. And the government, through cooperation with the United Nations, will coordinate financing from both public and private sectors, contribute and be involved in efforts to achieve the SDG goals by 2030. Malaysia also plans to issue our first sovereign sustainability bonds, or Sukuk, as well as the 2 billion ringgit green technology financing scheme, encourage the issuance of sustainable and responsible Sukuk, or SRIs. The budget also sees 550 million ringgit allocated for various environmental conservation efforts, such as the integrated island waste management and mangrove tree planting. This is just to name a few. In the long run, the government aims to help develop Malaysia into a sustainable finance hub. In laying the foundations towards this goal, the Ministry of Finance, with the support of the UK government under their UK PAC program, intends to develop an end-to-end framework to facilitate Malaysia's transition to become a sustainable financial hub. I would like to take this opportunity to thank His Excellency Charles Hay, our British High Commissioner to Malaysia, and his team for the assistance and support to enable us to embark on this initiative. Such roadmap will serve to address some of the key challenges in driving the green agenda, such as fragmented sustainability landscape, with different government ministries and agencies having their own initiatives that cover both finance and non-finance aspects. There is an urgent need to consolidate, harmonize, and ensure better coordination, along with awareness by general public and corporations. Malaysia could also improve its sustainable finance data infrastructure. This is to ensure targeted and meaningful discussion and policy making. We must develop a common set of principles and guidelines for consistent, comparable, and verifiable sustainability or ESG data. Supply for green or sustainability retail-related financial products are still at a nascent stage. Feedback from both banking and capital markets participants include the need to expand the universe of products, not just in terms of size, but also in terms of diversity. Once these challenges are addressed, I think both the public and private sector can clearly communicate their sustainability-related decisions, strategies, and program criteria for their respective shareholders and stakeholders. This in turn makes it easier, I believe, for beneficiaries to assess how their capital is used and for companies to attract financing at a competitive cost that fully considers all the ESG factors. According to the UN Environmental Report, approximately $3.2 trillion of green investments is needed in ASEAN from 2016 to 2030 in sectors such as infrastructure, renewable energy, and agriculture. Public sector alone will not be able to finance that, given, especially now, tightening fiscal space following the introduction of the various stimulus packages to curtail the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And hence, a significant share of this investment will have to come from the private sources. This is why the Ministry of Finance has put finance at the heart of our sustainability agenda, as the financial sector is in a unique position to incentivize transition. This can be done by mobilizing private capital to lend to, invest in, and insure businesses or projects that take sustainability into consideration. This represents a very significant opportunity for the financial sector, not only commercially, but also in terms of playing a leadership role, demonstrating its social purpose in our journey towards sustainable development. Without a doubt, sustainability is a topic that cuts across every sector in the economy. As we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic, there will be accelerated interest from a range of stakeholders, such as the communities, employees, customers, and investors, to incorporate sustainable practices into our businesses. I understand over the past 5 decades, the BMCC, the British Malaysian Chamber of Commerce, has been a catalyst in providing businesses with networking events, branding exposure, trade services, and industry advocacy. Today, it has firmly rooted itself as one of Southeast Asia's most prolific chambers. And the BMCC, playing an important role in advancing bilateral relations, trade relations between the UK and Malaysia, can be a catalyst to support the government's ambitions and bridging the link between government and industry players in the UK, particularly in our sustainability agenda. I see a lot of potential for both UK companies to work with Malaysian businesses achieving this. Before I end, I would like to urge all the companies who are on the call today to rethink and realign your businesses in support of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. This includes, firstly, reorienting capital flows or re-entry capital towards sustainable investment to achieve environmentally friendly and inclusive growth. Secondly, managing financial risk stemming from climate change, environmental degradation, and social issues. And lastly, fostering transparency and long-termism, right, in financial and economic activity. So with that, I shall pass the floor back to Abrar. So thank you.
Thank you, YB. Thank you very much for your insightful deliberation. Before I go to our Excellency, I just wanted to remind the viewers that please put your questions in slido.com, and there are almost 200 viewers at this point in time. We encourage you to post questions to YB and Excellency, the British High Commissioner. So let me allow me to introduce His Excellency Charles Hay, MVO British High Commissioner to Malaysia. So we all know him. He has been here for almost 1.5 years now. So Charles, without further ado, I would request you to please deliver your speech. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Abrar, and it's a real pleasure to be here today. And, slightly unexpectedly here for the second time today, having already delivered some remarks earlier on. But for those people who were watching at that stage, please don't switch off, because I'm now going to deliver remarks on behalf of the Lord Mayor of the City of London. And I hope you all heard from the MC that the Lord Mayor, unfortunately, at the very, very last minute had to pull out for personal family reasons. So he regrets that, and I do extend his apologies. But I do have his remarks in front of me. So if you will imagine while I'm speaking that I'm the Lord Mayor of the City of London, who is a man called William Russell. And for those of you who don't know what the Lord Mayor or who the Lord Mayor is, it's one of the oldest offices in the world. And in fact, William Russell, the current mayor, is the 692nd Lord Mayor of the City of London. And he's not Mayor of London, he's Lord Mayor of the City of London, which means that in effect he is a sort of ambassador for the UK's, he's a global ambassador for the UK's financial and professional services sector, which of course, as you all know, are centred in the City of London. And it's a very important role that person plays. And I've been very privileged that during my time here in Malaysia, we've had a visit from the Lord Mayor of the City of London, and my previous role as ambassador in Korea, the Lord Mayor came twice. And really, it's a very important role because, as I say, they can speak for the whole of the City of London. And the conference today, with respect to the City of London, couldn't have come at a better time because last week they hosted a so-called Green Horizon Summit. And that was backed by the Green Finance Institute and the World Economic Forum. And the summit brought together world-leading financiers, politicians and thought leaders to invigorate the financial sector's response to climate change. But most importantly, the conference wasn't about discussion, it was about action, how the sector is implementing and will continue to implement tangible practices and policies to create a climate-resilient economy by 2050. And 2050, you'll recall from my earlier comments, is the deadline that the UK government has set for a zero-carbon economy. And one of the key outcomes of the summit was the launch of the Private Finance Strategy by Mark Carney, who is the former governor of the Bank of England, and now he's the UN Special Envoy for Climate Action and the UK's financial advisor for COP26. COP26 is the global climate change conference taking place in a year's time in Glasgow. Now, this strategy, the Private Finance Strategy, sets out a framework for the financial services industry, making sure that every financial decision takes climate change into account. And already a lot of progress has been made in getting the framework off the ground, with the focus set on the 3 R's. And they're the formula for success in a green world. The first one is reporting. Better reporting enables financial institutions to price climate risk and value. Secondly, risk. Better risk management keeps the financial system stable for all and ensures prosperity. And together, reporting and risk management unlock number 3, the returns. Because returns are inherent in this transition for companies, financial institutions, and ultimately for individuals too. So I'd strongly encourage you all to read the strategy, which contains clear actions for all actors across the financial services value chain. Another major development to come out of that summit was the launch of Bloomberg's working paper for the Climate Finance Leadership Initiative. And that paper seeks to strengthen investment conditions for private climate finance in emerging markets. Curated by a group of global investors, they're looking to work with governments like Malaysia to accelerate investment into green projects. The consultation period for the working paper is now open and is a great opportunity for all of you to help shape sustainable investments in emerging markets. They also had the launch of the report Measuring Portfolio Alignment from the Asset Management Industry. This was written by David Blood and the Portfolio Alignment team. And the report underpins the need for more forward-thinking, robust metrics when measuring investment portfolios against net zero transition goals. Identifying the right metrics for reporting will be critical if we're going to proactively allocate capital to those driving the transition and to send signals to those lagging behind. And again, this should be mandatory reading for all asset managers around the world. Demonstrating its commitment to a net zero economy, the UK government has also had some important announcements at the time of that summit. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, declared that the UK government will introduce a new green taxonomy to help firms and investors understand the impact of their decisions on the environment. The UK government is also going to issue their first sovereign green bond in 2021. And, even better, the UK government plans to set the UK on a path to mandatory TCFD for all listed corporates and financial firms by 2025. And in doing so, the UK will become the first G20 country to take that very important step. Ladies and gentlemen, these are just a few of the many announcements made during Green Horizons Summit last week. To discover more of them, or to simply read some of the speeches made, please do head to the Green Horizons Summit website. What the summit made very clear was that we are fast approaching a world in which every financial decision will take climate change into account. That financing the greatest economic transformation of our time is the future of finance. And financial markets have the power to put us on track for Paris and prosperity. And we all have a pivotal role to play in delivering the transition to a net zero and climate resilient future. So let us all move forward together, and there is no time to waste. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. Now we move on to our Q&A session. Before we go on to take questions from our audience, may I start with a couple of questions? First of all, to YB, thanks and congratulations for a very inclusive budget that you have tabled recently, taking into account all segments of the economy. I'll now delve into sustainability is important for our long-term future. How do you see that government and from your side you can encourage businesses as well as financial institutions, being an experienced banker yourself, can be encouraged to go into this green economy or sustainable financing? Will there be any extra incentives? How do you see it unfolding in the future?
Thank you, Abrar. Again, thank you for having me here. So Malaysia, I think just like any other countries, we need to rethink about our development agenda. The pandemic is obviously a wake-up call for all of us in the world. As I mentioned in my remarks just now, sustainable development and finance need to play a role, right? A role in driving the economy. Put things into perspective, the numbers indicate that there are more than 3,000 signatories and principles of responsible investment. This of investment managers and owners with a total management of more than $100 billion US. Moreover, the total AUM allocated to the ESG by funds which invest in companies with commendable ESG costs have grown 16% on an annual basis for the last 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. So the total size of these assets have grown from 0.6 trillion US dollars all the way up to 30 trillion US dollars. So this reflects the trend, and I think more and more investors are going to invest in sustainable business. And also, funds are also increasingly moving towards companies that demonstrate a clear commitment towards, for example, reducing carbon footprint or supporting social objectives in communities they serve. So, as I mentioned earlier, I think finance will play a central role in ensuring companies to become more sustainable, incorporating ESG elements, businesses' core values, ensures decisions are made with a long-term objective of not harming the environment and also communities. So I think stakeholders' perception will play a major role. Evaluation of the company and will also impact the talent, I believe, that will want to join or attract join to the company. So I'm sure everyone here is aware that the recent, if I can share, if I can say the Volkswagen emission scandal, right? That is a very good example of what not being ESG compliant can do to a corporate brand. You know, I mentioned Volkswagen. It's not part of the British product range. So.
Yes, thank you. I'll just take one question from the audience. It's from Rosman Hamza. Tengku, natural gas has been driving socio-economic growth in Malaysia for decades and plays an important role as complementary fuel to drive the growth of renewables in Malaysia. Is there any part of Budget 2021 that enhances the role of natural gas in driving economic recovery?
Well, we announced in the budget one part of this, which we consider hydrogen as one of the for the public utility for the buses in Sarawak, and then we announced that we will implement it also across the country. That's one. But I think if you look at it holistically, I mentioned earlier that the budget tried to look into the 17 SDGs, US SDGs. It is a journey. What's important is we take the first step. Right? I think this is the first time the Malaysian budget has started with this initiative. And if you look at the four thrusts of the budget, sustainability is one of the four key thrusts of the budget. You know, with three main objectives, which is about people, businesses, and economy. So that's the start. And I think I just intend to be very honest with you. We just finished the meeting with the Economic Planning Unit, which was chaired by the Prime Minister. We also talked about the 12th Malaysia Plan, and sustainability will be one of the key agenda of the next 5-year plan, of our nation's 5-year plan, which is the 12th Malaysia Plan that will be announced, that will be revealed in Parliament next year. So this, yes, I think that's one of the longer-term initiative or objective that the government is looking at in terms of our sustainability agenda.
Thank you. YB, another question is regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have seen that the movement control orders and the life and livelihood. So going forward, how do you see that recovery path for Malaysia and also the region, or from your perspective, as you are every day updated on what's happening and the plans and how to take forward the economy?
Thank you. Well, this year, the official forecast that was announced in the budget is around 4.5. We think will be, where within the range of what Negara announced, between 3.5 to 5.5 negative growth for Malaysia. So we are obviously already technically in a recession, but so is the other, at least another 150 nations in the world facing the same predicament where more than 150 countries will be facing recession. So your question about how we're going to handle this in terms of growth, we have seen that for Malaysia anyway, after a very dismal performance in the second quarter, our GDP net numbers was negative 17.1. The third quarter was much better, moderation in growth, but it is still a big improvement from the second quarter. It's about negative 2.7%, to negative 2.6%. Is it negative 2.7? Sorry, negative 2.7% GDP. And then the fourth quarter is really dependent on how long we face this CMCO. But what I can assure you is that the CMCO that we are facing today, or the conditional MCO, is not as bad as the first MCO that we had in March, right? Because that's when we didn't allow, I think your members know, many business activities to function or to operate. So this time around, all the business and economy is allowed to open, despite the control in some of the movements. So therefore, the impact is not as bad as before. However, having said that, we do see the numbers are showing much stronger positive growth in terms of manufacturing, exports, even the FDI, and the capital inflow is still very strong. The bond markets showing positive capital inflows. Our stock market is actually the only positive stock market in terms of performance in the whole region. Currency is strengthening by 5% so far year to date. So we're seeing numbers are okay to make sure that we continue with this recovery process. And of course, Malaysia being an open economy will be highly dependent on the performance of the global economy. And that, I think, is, again, if you look at the IMF, World Bank, and Asian Development Bank forecasts, not just for Malaysia, but for globally, there is strong upside, especially with the recent positive news on when the vaccines will be available, right, commercially. So that has been positive. So we are monitoring this. But again, I think to me and to the government, we really need to learn how to adapt to this new normal, right? We need to follow the right SOPs. We need to make sure that we win this war against COVID, so that the faster we are able to handle the COVID situation, the faster and the quicker the economy can rebound.
Thank you, YB. I think to give some due credit, leading from the front, Malaysia has responded very quickly, and I think all the relief measures and a very sizable stimulus package and the coordination, at least with the banks and all we have seen, I think it's been exceptional. I mean, I would like to thank you on behalf of the community for your leadership in that. I'll now go to Excellency Charles. There's a question from Liz 2 MBB. I would like to ask about any plans to collaborate, partnership with UK, Malaysia in promoting and bringing forth sustainability and climate risk in general.
Yes.
Sort of partnership with Malaysia, how you're seeing that happening?
Yes, I talked a bit about that in my earlier comments, and we have active cooperation with Malaysia and supporting Malaysia in a couple of areas in particular that I should talk about. One is our Prosperity Fund, which is running a low carbon energy transition program, and it's a program that runs across all the countries of ASEAN, and the aim is to support Malaysia in a low carbon transition, and there's a whole series of different work streams that are going on in that program, including workshops for regulators and for the financial sector too. Can I come back and just make a comment on the earlier question about gas? Because I think that's a really interesting issue when it comes to tackling climate change. And if I can use the example of the UK in the way that we've transitioned, this year, for the first time, we've gone for several weeks during the course of the year where we haven't been burning any coal at all in generating power in the UK. And it's the first time that we've managed to do that since the Industrial Revolution about 150 years ago. And that's because we've been transitioning, as many other countries have, away from the dirtier forms of energy towards cleaner And a big part of the way that the UK did it was to transition through gas, the so-called dash for gas back in the 1990s, 2000s. And gas, of course, is a much less polluting substance. And of course, new coal-fired power stations are undoubtedly cleaner than the old ones, but they're still very polluting and generating carbon dioxide compared to other forms of energy. But what we're seeing now is that the cheapest form of energy is solar. The cheapest form of newly installed energy is solar. And what we're starting to see is a number of countries are making a transition. They're in effect leaping through fossil fuels and going straight to renewables. And I think that's a very important tendency, which is going to make a difference, because the energy transition is one of the most important things that countries need to do in terms of getting to that net zero target.
Thank you. I'll take another question from the audience to YB. Kudos to, it's from Surin Suksuwan. Kudos to YB Tengku on the progressive measures to integrate the sustainability agenda in the national budget. Apart from Ministry of Finance, how well is the buy-in from other ministries, and how do you propose to mainstream sustainability within the relevant government institutions?
Right, thank you. Well, as you know, the budget goes through a process and we engage many stakeholders, and of course, cabinet members we've engaged all cabinet members in the preparation of the budget. And the budget was, before being the table, the parliament was approved by the cabinet. So I think they are all very aware and very supportive and in line with this sustainability agenda. What's more encouraging to me is that, some actually are really pushing hard for this. One being the Economic Planning Unit, which, like I said earlier, in their planning, in their announcement that will be coming in early next year, in fact, they are tabling the 12th Malaysia Plan. It's very clear that sustainability is one of the key agenda of our nation for the next 5 years. So in terms of getting the buy-in and alignment of other ministries and agencies under those ministries, I think it has been good. And especially I think people realize, and because this thing is not new, but I think to put it on paper in the budget and in the 12th Malaysia Plan is about educating the public, right? I think within the government, people are aware, but we need to spend a bit more time explaining to the public why this is important, not just for us, the country, but also for them, right? It is everyone has to be aligned towards this common goal, which will ensure the sustainability of Malaysia's economy as well.
Thank you,
Anwar, can I just come in with a comment on that?
Excellency, if you want to give any concluding remarks for 30 seconds, then we'll take it, and then I'll go to YB for his concluding remarks, because we are just running. Yeah, please.
Thanks very much, Abrar. Yeah, I just wanted to come in also a comment, but I'll make it a concluding remark as well, which is on the importance of not just the government working together collectively on this important issue, but also all different sectors of the country. And what the UK found, when we set a target that was less than net zero, we found that we weren't making nearly as much progress as we wanted to, because every part of the economy and the society thought that somebody else was going to make the effort. But what we've done, by setting a net zero target, we sent the clearest possible message that everybody needs to work together to get to zero as an ambition.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining. I hand over to YB for your concluding remarks for the session. Thank you for your time. We much appreciate it.
Okay, sorry, Abrar. I could barely hear His Excellency Charles just now, and you, Abrar. But I think you were saying that you were concluding.
Yeah. I was just saying that thanks to Excellency, and to give your concluding remarks, and thanking you for sparing your valuable time with the members and the participants today. Thank you, YB.
Thank you, Abrar. Maybe I can just say one or two final
yes,
words.
please. Your concluding remarks.
How we can work together with the UK companies and UK government. I mentioned earlier, we are currently working with the UK government under their UK PAC program to develop a sustainable finance roadmap for Malaysia. So I think we can learn a lot from UK and also from the companies who are here today and to share that, especially when it comes to experience. But I think the idea today is also to encourage Malaysian companies to work closer with the UK companies as well to see how we can achieve the objective that we've discussed today. I think Malaysia really will stand to benefit from UK's experience, especially on decarbonization as well, right? So these are some examples. So thank you very much again, Abrar, for having me. I hope that I can see all of you in person very soon. And again, stay safe with this period. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I hand over back to Mastura.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, YB. Thank you, His Excellency, for the highly valuable insights. It has been definitely broadened our perspectives on the conference theme of sustainable finance, a blueprint for green recovery. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings to the conclusion of the British Malaysian Chamber of Commerce and Standard Chartered Green Conference 2020. On behalf of us at BMCC and Standard Chartered, I would like to thank all of you for being part of today's virtual event. Stay safe and have a lovely week ahead. Thank you.